GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Friday, the 18th of August. Today, the government has laid out steps to protect the use of cash across the country after GB News' Don't Kill Cash campaign attracted over 300,000 signatures.
And tributes have poured in after former talk show host and journalist Sir Michael Parkinson died at the age of 88. We will look back at his life as a national treasure.
And would you pay for a jab to rewire your brain and reduce addiction to alcohol? Scientists say the early-stage tests on monkeys have proved incredibly effective.
And the weekend is on the way, so how will the weather look this time? Well, here is Aidan McGivern from the Met Office.
The humidity is rising, low pressure is edging closer. Some very lively weather expected later today. I'll have more in the forecast.
Yeah, and I think if you're anywhere between the Midlands and the south, you're going to see an awful lot of rain today. Yeah, so a very good morning.
Yeah, Mrs. and kids are off to Wales, so brace yourselves while I'm working here.
Absolutely. We'll tell you more. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Now, I mean, some of the papers are saying, we'll find out more, obviously, in detail in our weather. But some places are going to see almost a month's rain in a day.
Yeah, it's so predictable,
isn't it? What's going on?
We have a good week, and then we have a terrible week. Welcome to Britain, our new normal.
Yeah, and you just can't rely on it either. You just can't know when you wake up in the morning whether it's going to be a good or bad day weather-wise.
I was joking out there a minute ago. They were saying, well, at least there's no chance of there being a forest fire in Wales. Hey, I think we struggle to light a barbecue.
Yeah, you really would at the moment. You wouldn't want to go outdoors, would you? Yeah. And if you do go outdoors and you visit one of these sunflower farms, apparently, it's reported in the Times that some of these sunflower farms, which invite people in, have your picture taken in amongst all the sunflowers, apparently they've noticed that there is a growing problem with people doing naked selfies in amongst the sunflowers. And some of the other people, the families who go along, say, you know, you can be walking through the sunflowers, taking pictures of your kids, and suddenly you come across basically a naked photo shoot. So some of the sunflower farms have put up warnings saying, you know, you're welcome to take photographs, but please don't go topless or naked.
You're calling it a problem?
I don't know, is it? It's a problem, but they quote one mum, it's quite funny. She says, there we were doing photographs, or she said her son happened upon a topless woman at the farm last week. She said, you should have seen his face. He didn't know where to look. And they said,
he copped an eyeful.
She said he copped a right eyeful after stumbling across a woman in only a thong.
It's like a carry-on movie made real. I think it's marvellous.
Yeah, it is.
Why not?
Yeah. And how about the Lionesses? Hey, that's another great talking point, because didn't we do well? I mean, wasn't it unbelievable?
Yeah.
And I just want to know whether, I mean, you're into your football.
Yeah.
Is this Sunday coming with the Lionesses up against the Spanish? World Cup final. So we haven't really been there since '66, have we, in a World Cup final?
That's if you think that the lads and the ladies' games are the same.
Well, that's what I want to know. Is this as important as 1966?
I don't think it is.
Why not?
Because if you look at the relative sporting standards, for example, I think the England Lionesses would struggle to beat any of the top flights in Britain. Fantastic, good luck to you, but I don't think the two sports are on parity. That's just me. No doubt I'd be screamed at as a misogynist.
Well, yeah, that would, because
that.
that's what they used to say about ladies' tennis.
Yeah.
And Billie Jean King proved it wrong in the end. And I mean, yes, all right, maybe the Lionesses up against, I don't know, one of our England team, how well would they do? But that's not the point, is it? The point is, why should the man's game be given much more fuss than the women's game?
Well, it gets a far bigger global audience. There's
yeah, but that's only because it started later.
Physicality, it's everything. Another big talk point, of course, is will Prince William attend the final? He's being widely criticised. If it was a blokes' match, of course he would be there. Everybody's saying, should he attend or not?
Yeah, well, I think he will.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not being told one way or the other, but it doesn't... That's not the point. I mean, I can imagine if he was planning to go, because he wanted to wait and see if they'd get to the final, then the plans... He doesn't want to necessarily announce the plans to the world yet.
Yeah.
I think he will turn up.
Yeah, and the final debate, I think we can all agree on, and that is, should we open the pubs? This Sunday morning, the kick-off, of course, is 11 a.m. Pubs aren't legally licensed to open until midday on a Sunday. Should that be changed?
But the pubs and clubs have to be a really great way to watch it, don't you think? Because they'll have big tellies and you're with people.
Yeah.
And I think they should be allowed to open. But
Same here. I agree on that.
I really do. I think that's really important. When's kick-off on Sunday?
It's 11 a.m.
Oh, that's all right. You can watch us first.
Yeah, just an hour before the pubs normally open, and get it forward an hour and have a quick job. Don't forget the Japan World Cup, when the pubs in Britain routinely opened at breakfast time, was fantastic. It felt really novel, brought everyone together. You could have a full English with a few beers.
Well, that's right. And it's not just about the drinking. It's not just saying, can we start drinking that early in the morning? It's about the camaraderie. It's the being with other people to watch.
Football
is magic.
Yeah, football is just a sport best enjoyed with your comrades, with your mates, you know, in a communal place like that where you can shout without scaring the cat.
Absolutely. But if you remember 1966 and how amazing that was, do you think this coming Sunday, is as cool and as great and as momentous as 1966? And if you don't think so, why not? Why isn't it? It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, it's big. And it's fair to say, you know, the Lionesses, if they win the European Championship and the World Cup, and if they even do it on penalties...
No, I couldn't stand that.
Then they'll have done everything that the men's team hasn't. So it's undeniably a huge success.
OK, so we want to hear from you, please. GBviews at gbnews.com. And have you ever taken a selfie in a sunflower field? Obviously, we don't want to see it if it's... we don't want to see it if it's naked, because I don't think we can do that on a Friday morning. But no, we'd love to know whether you've been tempted. Yeah. And the other big talking point, I think, again today, is the news of this jab that could defeat, almost defeat alcoholism. It's working in trials at the moment in monkeys.
Yeah.
It's an injection into the brain, but it apparently stops the hit you get from alcohol and therefore just goads you off alcohol without being dangerous by the sound of it.
And in 90% of cases, it just got rid of the cravings because the pleasure of taking alcohol was just eradicated from the brain's pathways. Could be an absolute game changer.
My goodness, it could be incredible.
Yeah, total game changer.
Could make a difference to the National Health Service, to everything, because alcohol is one of the leading causes of just about everything that's wrong in our society.
Yeah, like early deaths, and a lot of this, of course, kicked in during the pandemic. But a huge story. We've got loads coming up in today's show.
It's a packed show today. So to our top story, shall we? GB News' Don't Kill Cash campaign is already yielding results. Overnight, the Treasury has announced plans to assure access to cash facilities, guaranteeing cash will go on. More than 300,000 people, and that's you, you've signed our petition to save pound sterling coins and banknotes from extinction and then slow the move to a cashless society.
Yeah, it was a fantastic day yesterday as GB News presenters delivered the petition in person to the Treasury at number 11 Downing Street, and within a matter of hours they said they will require people and businesses to be no more than 3 miles away from a cash withdrawal or deposit centre, and they will even give the Financial Conduct Authority powers to fine banks who fail to comply.
And there they were outside number 11 delivering your petition.
Yeah, and I was saying yesterday, a lot of people will be very thrilled by the prospect of Nigel Farage hammering on the door at Downing Street. Others might be quite chilled by the prospect. But it was a great moment, Anne, a real prospect of seeing people power in progress, holding power to account, and literally overnight the government have reacted. A fantastic result for GB News and mainly for you, the viewers who signed that petition. So thank you.
Let's talk to Dr. Roger Gold, who's a former advisor to the Treasury as well as to the Bank of England. He joins us now for a reaction. It's a very good morning to you. This is quite something. I mean, I imagine the Treasury say, well, we were thinking about this anyway. But we at GB News feel that, well, we certainly prompted a lot of the action that suddenly happened overnight. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it's fantastic. I want to get the same group of Nigel and Bev and Liam and Patrick and Dubes to come with me to the Bank of England and get them to stop raising and even lower interest rates. Because again, like killing cash, it's a very, very stupid idea. So, you know, well done to GB News and the giant piggy bank. We'll need to think of something similar to bring to the Bank of England. But I think that this should be done for, try to right all of the various idiotic things that this government has done or failed to do. It's just such a great movement to see the 5 of them there and get your 300,000 signatures. It's brilliant. We need more of this to start putting things right.
Yeah, Roger, it's been excellent. Of course, here's a petition that was ostensibly set up to help protect small businesses that trade in cash, the elderly who prefer cash, and oftentimes who are left behind by technological advances, smartphones, having to download apps to park their cars. All of these things become barriers and they impact upon the elderly and the disabled and the most infirm. But do you think it's fair to say that the big banks would like to phase out cash? It's dirty, it's expensive, it has to be handled. Is the direction of travel towards cashless? And with that in mind, how important is this victory by GB News?
I think that the direction of travel is certainly towards cashless, and that is a good thing. Really, digital transactions have gone up from 45% to 85% in the recent past. So, you know, people are certainly using cash less, but that doesn't mean you have to get rid of it because, as you say, the elderly, people with disabilities, people in rural areas, all sorts of people, traders that need to carry large amounts of cash at the end of the day to the bank, people who want to, as one person pointed out, slip a tenner in a birthday card for somebody. We still need cash. So I think that what GB News has done here is really fantastic. And the fact that the Treasury and the government have actually listened and done something about it is wonderful. And as I say, we need to, and you need to do more of this. And the next thing I want to do is get those 5 to come with me to the Bank of England and tell that Bailey Osiris, that thick-skinned gentleman, Mr. Bailey there, nobody seems to get through to him. Let's see if we can't all get through to him, because interest rates have killed the economy and have literally destroyed the lives of millions of Britons without doing anything to reduce inflation. Rishi is jumping up and down yesterday. Hey, we're beating inflation. No, you're not. Real inflation, core inflation, is unchanged at 6.9%.
See, what I find interesting as well about this is that this isn't GB News sitting down and planning and plotting something. This is people power in its most basic sense, isn't it? It's literally just about people getting together and signing a petition. Yes, we've enabled that, but that's it. And then you look as well at those pictures of the team outside number 11, and you look at the difference that Nigel Farage has made himself just in complaining about the debanking scandal, and that's probably going to grow and grow. It just makes you wonder whether anyone inside number 11 or inside the Bank of England actually have a clue as to what ordinary people think.
No, I don't think they do. I think they've proven that over many years, especially recent years. And it's a shame, Anne, because you would think that for two people, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, who themselves may very well likely be evicted in the next 18 months, from number 10 and 11, they'd be sympathetic with people with mortgages who are going to lose their homes, but it just doesn't register.
So, Roger, finally, how important a victory do you think this is for the everyman, the everywoman, the small person who will not sit down and be silenced? They've stood up and roared, "Don't kill cash."
Absolutely, tremendously. It's actually the first time over the last few years we have seen a tremendous oppression of the British public, the highest taxation, all kinds of ridiculous, stupid things done or not done, 5 pledges that haven't been made, a dismal record, a record by the opposition where they haven't even stood up and said they'd do something different. I mean, our leadership is very, very disappointing. So for the people to stand up, led by GB News, led by Nigel and Liam Halligan and the rest of them, standing up and saying, hey, you cannot kill cash. I mean, this is just one aspect of our lives in society that you guys are not going to crush. We're not having it. And for the government to respond because they know that the consequences would not be good, I think is just an extraordinary victory and a tremendous vindication of GB News and its growing position in the British media and British society.
Wow.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for saying it. Yes,
bringing
good to speak to you.
a tear to this jaded eye.
Yeah.
Dr. Roger Gowell, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Tremendous. Thank you.
Well, when we form a government, who will you be?
I don't think they want me anywhere near it, but certainly a lot of people, Anne, were remarking upon the fact that seeing Nigel, on Downing Street, whatever you think of his heritage, the fact he's taken such a key place now, as you rightly pointed out, in the debanking scandal, and shining a light on all of this
He's already achieved change, actually.
Is astonishing.
Even if you don't like his politics, you have to acknowledge that there's been significant change since we started having a go.
What about getting you in government? You'd be brilliant.
Oh, far too old now.
I don't know about that.
Who would want the job? That's what I keep coming back to.
A lot of people would vote for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. But no, even if they did, which I doubt, no, I really wouldn't want the job, would you? Crumbs, no. Anyway, let's move on to somebody I really do want to talk about as well. Tributes, of course, are now pouring in for Michael Parkinson, Parky, one of Britain's most celebrated broadcasters, who sadly died yesterday at the age of 88.
Yeah, a magnificent television career spanning 7 decades. Sir Michael, fondly called Parky by friends and fans, became one of the greatest, if not the greatest, interviewers of all time with his long-running chat show.
Well, we're joined now in the studio by showbiz expert Stephanie Tetchy. Hi, Steph. Hi. You look like a ray of sunshine.
Well, we're not getting no sun outside, so I thought I'd bring it to the studio, even though we all naturally bring it. I'm devastated about Parky because I've interviewed him before, and he was one of my heroes, because when you think of the art of the interview, especially when you're interviewing celebrities, celebrities. He had it naturally.
And I'm so glad you're using the word interview.
Yeah.
Because what really annoys me, and I know a lot of the tabloid papers use the word chat because it's a short one and it makes a good headline, but he did more than chat to people.
No, it was an interview. I think chat gives it that whole showbiz thing, but there is an art to the interview and there's an art to getting stuff from celebrities, which we saw him do over the past 7 decades. And he was a proud Yorkshire man. He came at a time in TV where it was mostly about the southern accents, but he came through refreshing. And you can imagine the world of showbiz have been paying tributes to him. Sir David Attenborough said being interviewed by him was like meeting a friend. Sir Elton John said he loved his company, his incredible knowledge of cricket, because he was a massive cricket fan, and Barnsley Football Club. They paid a minute's silence to him ahead of their game yesterday.
I think everybody was, you know, gutted, actually, when I heard. I was shocked when I heard the news. And we knew he was getting older and frailer. We knew that. But there are some... When somebody's a national treasure, you never want to see them go.
No, and he always has this... He always had this zest for life, because I always used to have to phone him because he wrote a few books towards the end of his life, and he was always friendly, and he was always still positive and optimistic about the new generation of journalists coming up. When I interviewed him, he said he had no regrets, but he did feel sorry for the new generation of journalists, because he says we've had all the best during our time.
Yes, I think he's right.
And it's interesting how the word journalist is overused, but this is the guy who really worked the patch. I mean, locally on the local press,
Manchester Guardian,
and then
Daily Express,
then the Observer, then the Sunday Times, the sports correspondent. He always wrote
left school with 2 O-levels. You know, that's all. He was a real working class lad.
But a proper trained, grassroots journalist who put in all that shoe leather and hard work, had the common touch way before it got anywhere near a TV screen.
Well, that's why respect is due to him, because I think sometimes you get a lot of these showbiz presenters who actually haven't gone through the journalism training or haven't even spent time in a newspaper, so it's quite salacious and it's quite scandalous, where for him there was that pure passion for journalism, and even though he was interviewing celebrities, he still had that knack of asking the right questions and keeping them at ease. So
common touch.
Yeah. So,
have you got a picture of you with him?
Yes, I do, actually. So I think this was after an interview that I did when he was promoting his book with Muhammad Ali. So he even had the power to tame the tiger of Muhammad Ali. So
I think we also have a picture and a view with Parky.
Yeah, well, I knew Parky very well, as you can imagine, because I trained with him at TVAM when I was a young nothing. He was the older guy there and passed on all his wit and wisdom. He was wonderful. We met there when I was doing a radio programme. He came in and was a wonderful chatter there. That's about 5 years ago. But I knew him obviously from early days. He came to dinner at my house in Sydney just on the day of our wedding, actually, and sat in the living room and just chatted away and kept. There he is sitting there having a nibble. I'm sitting on the sofa there with wife Mary, and there I am with both of them in our living room in our gorgeous house in Sydney, I have to say. But it was I've got lots of so many lovely stories, but basically it's just about the fact that he was wonderful.
And we have to think of Lady Mary today, because they were together for over 50 years, 3 children.
They were a smashing couple.
You know,
they were absolutely brilliant. In fact, they did a Saturday morning programme on TVM for a couple of years, I think, together.
Oh wow!
Yeah, oh yeah, Michael and Mary show, as it were.
Lovely. Yeah. I've never heard of that. Actually,
oh yeah, they did. Yeah, because when the Famous Five launched TVM, I'm sure a lot of people watching will probably remember, and then it was sort of a bit disastrous of a start. And then when they reshuffled everything, Michael and Mary went on to the weekends and they did a Saturday morning show.
You see,
I think it might have been Sunday morning as well.
I would love to watch that.
And when my mum flew out to Sydney for my wedding, she found herself in the same compartment as Michael and Mary, and she didn't know, but they heard the air stewardess saying to my mum, "Mrs. Diamond, would you like blah blah blah?" And they came over and they said, "Are you Anne's mother?" And she said, "Yeah." They said, "Come on up front with us and let's have a party." And when she got off the plane, she said, "Oh, you'll never guess who I just spent the entire 24-hour journey with." She had the most marvellous time because they were generous, both of them were, and lovely.
And you know, like he did battle through prostate cancer, but the family have said he did pass away after a brief illness.
Well, he was 88, I suppose, and as I say, we knew he was getting very frail.
Yeah,
but the whole family. Can you imagine? in one stage it might be nice, on the other it must be... Every single front page has got an enormous picture of him, and so many of the insides as well. You can't get away from the wonderful pictures of him today, and that must be, in a way, wonderful for them, but also very, very sad.
And I think the stats are incredible. Over 2,000 interviews, 800 episodes. I can imagine whoever's at the BBC having to dig through those archives. There's just an incredible plethora of work.
But if you start feeling sad, look at the interview with Emu.
Yeah, that's
Rod Hurl and Emu. I showed that to my kids. I showed my kids yesterday. They were laughing their socks off.
It's the first time ever a puppet had sort of taken over and reduced somebody who was very famous to the floor.
He was his shoe off. It was
absolutely.
Majestic.
And then, of course, he had a wonderful relationship with Miss Piggy.
Yes.
Who came back on his show many times because she loved him so much.
And he also made household names of Sir Billy Colony as well. And also, I wonder how Meg Ryan is feeling today, because that was one of his stone-face interviews, which he had to apologise for 20 years later.
But he learned from that. He always said that he looks back and he learned from that. And that humility, that, I made a mistake. Even at that stage of his career, was willing to learn and change and adapt. That is genuine talent.
And that's the lesson, and that's the legacy he leaves us all, I think. Yeah, so R.I.P. Michael Parkinson. Didn't think I'd say that. It's very upsetting, isn't it? Shall we catch up with what is going to be a big day weather-wise?
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office. It's a windy start to the day, and you'll notice the humidity out there, even if it's not especially sunny. That humidity, along with some instability, courtesy of low pressure to the southwest, leading to the risk of thunderstorms across central and southern parts during the morning this morning. Could cause some impacts with frequent lightning and some intense bursts of rain, but as always, these thunderstorms will be hit and miss, and they do tend to die away as they push northeastwards during the morning. Northern Scotland staying fine, southwest England largely fine as well. Some sunshine coming through, but a lot of cloud and a strong wind, especially for northwest Wales. 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts could impact people on their holidays, for example. Then, well, it gets very lively overnight. A band of heavy rain moves into southwestern areas. That pushes into the rest of England, into Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by midnight. And at the same time, there's the risk of some serious thunderstorms developing across eastern England. Frequent lightning, large hail, intense outbreaks of rain. It's also going to be a windy night and a muggy night. 18, 19 Celsius across some parts of southern UK and mid to high teens widely by dawn across many parts of the country. Heavy persistent rain then moves into parts of Scotland, especially the north and the east. Further spells of rain or showers across Northern Ireland, the rest of Scotland, northern England. A quieter picture for the rest of England and Wales. Sunny spells and showers by and large, and still some warmth in that sun. In the southeast, highs of 25 or 26 degrees.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, I was asking, and we were arguing, whether or not the women's football on Sunday World Cup is as big a moment as 1966. And it's got you going, because Andrew says, I attended Wembley in 1966 and I'm going to travel to Sydney for Sunday's final. I've waited a long time and I've given up on the blokes. Thanks, ladies, for getting us at last to a World Cup final.
So that's hearing it for the Lionesses. Tony in London has a somewhat different take. He says you simply just can't compare men's football to women. Wrexham played the USA women's team over 40 minutes and USA were losing 12-0. The standard is shocking. But well done, Lionesses.
See, Matt says, and that was also the USA women's team. I mean, you know, they've come later into the game as well. Matt says the women's football team reaching the final is fantastic. I was born after '66, so it's brilliant to see England in a World Cup final. Women's football is nearly as good as the men's. It just needs the big sponsors and TV coverage.
Yeah, final word to Con, who says, let's be honest, Martin and Anne, this country hasn't been good enough to win anything since 1966.
Well, maybe not. Maybe Sunday will disprove that. Right, stick with us. Up next, the government has called for pubs to open earlier for Sunday's Women World Cup final. Do you think that's the right decision? You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's 28 minutes past 6. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin.
Now, publicans are calling on the government to loosen licensing rules for pub opening hours this Sunday ahead of the Women's World Cup final, with the government encouraging councils overnight to get pubs open earlier.
The Lionesses, of course, are going to play Spain at 11 a.m. this Sunday, after beating Australia earlier this week. But current regulations mean that most pubs can't serve alcohol before 11, and many not until midday.
Well, Alex Ruthman is a restaurateur who says he is all for pubs opening early as it's good for business and the industry.
But social commentator Bushra Sheikh says, why would pubs want to open for something that isn't even a big deal? Ooh, good morning to you both.
But why don't we start with you, Alex, as somebody who's in favour of this. But before that, what are the technicalities around this? So is it true that on a Sunday you can't serve booze until midday? And how might you go about changing that for this one-off event?
What I would say is, broadly speaking, we have quite complex licences in this country. So I've had an active comparison with Spain, where I've been working previously, and there they tend to have just a broader licensing where they can open from 8 in the morning to whatever, and it's sort of driven by the market, what people want in the local area. And, of course, they have to enforce if there's drunk behaviour, anything that's antisocial, any security, anything like this, then obviously that becomes a problem for the licence. Here we have, driven by the licensing authority in the area, quite complex sort of situations where people have different trading hours, different opening hours and different hours for selling alcohol specifically. In this case, the issue is, I would say broadly, that most have a licence to sell alcohol from 11 or 12. What they'd like to do is start earlier because there's a special event that people want to attend and want to have a drink at, and there's not enough time between the semi-final and the final to get a temporary event notice in.
Right.
And if were they to apply for that before we know we're going to the final, it might be a wasted application.
Okay, so that's the technicalities, but in principle, it's a good thing, right? I mean, people should be able to go and watch sports somewhere and have a drink if they choose. Not compulsory to have a booze at 11 in the morning, but if you want to, surely they should be allowed.
Well, I would separate the personal for me from my own personal sort of feelings from what others do. I myself can't possibly access the thought or the idea that you would need to have a drink at 10 o'clock in the morning to enjoy a sports event, but obviously many people would like to. And from my point of view, every licensee is charged with the responsibility of making sure people behave responsibly, don't leave the venue drunk, make a mess, whether it be 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 10 o'clock at night. And as we all well know, the British are capable of getting drunk at any time of day and causing a problem. So I can't can't really see where the difference is here. And in fact, I would contend that dealing with a few people having a drink at 10 a.m. is a lot less difficult than dealing with a packed pub at 11 p.m.
10 p.m.
So we already have established that licensees and their staff are responsible and are able to act within the licensing laws at these times. I can't see what the problem is.
OK, Bushra, what's your point of view?
My point of view is, honestly, I don't think that many Brits need to have a drink so early in the morning. It's a football match. It's a Sunday morning. We are also trying to reduce our alcohol consumption in the UK as well. We are trying to veer away from that. So this might be an opportunity to really introduce people of how they can have a family-filled, enjoyed environment without having to get the Home Office and the government to do additional work when they've got other pressing things to do just to have alcohol for an additional hour.
But Bushra, in the name of gender equality, let's remember that during the Japan World Cup, pubs were open routinely at breakfast time in Britain and they were serving a full English with a few pints. It was fantastic. Surely we want the same for the women.
Oh, OK, so we're going to make this about gender. I think had maybe they have thought this out before, you know, they maybe had more time to understand that this could happen, you know, give people an extra hour. But I just don't see why. I mean, can pubs just not open without serving alcohol and you could have some snacks and some other drinks, you know? People, I mean, there are lots of lovely drinks that are mocktails that are not alcohol-based.
I just think on a special day when you're joining with other people and getting excited about something, I can't see what's wrong with a beer at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, can you?
May I?
Bushra?
Well, I think it's more culture. I personally don't drink, so I can enjoy myself without having alcohol. And I think this is a good issue to talk about because, in general, I think alcohol consumption is on the rise. We are seeing that people are drinking more. We are seeing antisocial behaviour. So these are kind of elements that we do need to look at across. And I do get your point. It's a football match, although personally, I don't think that the women's football is as great as the men's football. But that's my personal opinion. I don't think with women's football we're just there yet. I still feel like it's a very masculine game, and I'm used to seeing men play football and not women. But that's a whole different debate. But yeah, I just feel like an additional hour of alcohol is unnecessary. And honestly, the government have more important things to do than to worry about an extended license.
Well, you say that, but Sir Keir Starmer wants to call a bank holiday if the Lionesses win, so it is a political thing because people want brownie points. But back to the topic of drinking, Alex. I remember during the Japan World Cup, everyone said, oh my God, the English can't be trusted with alcohol, it's going to be chaos. That didn't happen. People can be trusted responsibly if you treat them as adults. We see in airports or even in train stations, travelling football fans having a drink and not always getting into trouble. So surely for this one-off, the government shouldn't be party poopers and we should say, go Lionesses, raise a glass to them.
Yeah, sorry, I have to slow down because I understand what you're saying. I need to take point by point what was said there. So basically what we're saying is it's a lot of the work to go to central government to make this one small change. I couldn't possibly agree. So the overarching thing is I'm old enough to remember when the magistrates court, in fact, when I went for my first licence, my mum was a magistrate in the local area and she had to recuse herself to make sure there was no bias. I remember the magistrates sitting at virtually zero cost to the community and making decisions in the local community, and now it's all centralised. So I couldn't agree more that it's a fiasco that we have to go to the Home Office to get a change in a minor thing like this. It's literally the equivalent to the CEO of GB News having to approve a biscuits order. It's a joke, OK, I agree with you.
Does happen, actually.
So let's just say, furthermore, if you look at the comparison with Spain, which I won't hop on about it, but I spent a lot of time there, I grew up there, the licences, you can open from 8 in the morning until 2 in the morning, normal cafe bar licence, no problem whatsoever. They have local police out making sure that there's no bad behaviour. Licensing objectives, in general, shouldn't interfere with business until there's a problem in the community because of people drinking.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. It shouldn't be intervening unnecessarily, and I couldn't agree more. I basically don't drink. I have a glass of wine every couple of months. I personally don't like to drink, but I don't understand where you get off deciding that people shouldn't be able to have a drink because you don't like having one.
As long as they behave.
It's literally like, if
I'm going to have to call time on it here, otherwise we don't have any time for anything else in the programme. But Alex, Bushra, thank you both so very much. Yeah. And of course, after what Bushra said there about the women's game not being as important, still want to hear your views on that, please. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Yeah, so stay with us for a look through all of Friday's newspapers. This is Breakfast on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Never heard anything so ridiculous. You said like that. Why is it a big...
thick and fast, particularly about the football, but also about the drinking. Anyway, a very good morning. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin. Shall we have a quick look at some of today's newspaper front pages? And, of course, most newspapers are leading with tributes to Sir Michael Parkinson. As we know now, yesterday we were told he died after a short illness. He was 88. And the Daily Star there, get away from weird aliens and things, and put Parky on the front, saying he was the king.
Yeah, with Emu, my favourite of his interviews. It was the A-level results, of course, yesterday, and the Eye leads with the reports warning the gap in academic achievements between wealthier and more deprived regions continues to widen.
The Daily Mail reports on the latest scandal at the British Museum. A top expert was sacked after some ancient artefacts went missing over the years.
It's a real whodunit, that one. And The Times says chemists and private clinics are now able to sell COVID booster jabs to those who are not eligible on the NHS after the health officials gave the green light to private sales.
The Guardian, meanwhile, says thousands of students in England are missing out on top grades as the government enforced a reversal of pandemic-era grade inflation. Well, time to go through the newspapers now. Joining us this morning, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth. So what are we starting with? I think I've lost my list.
We're starting with a bit of migration, aren't we, Nigel?
This is
front page The Telegraph, the French, once again, dragging the heels.
Yes, this is sort of Martin's I told you so moment, you like stories like this. Yeah, this is the front of the Telegraph. What they're saying is that we've been saying that our £480 million to the French has been stopping people getting on the boats and coming over. The British government keep heralding this as one of the successes, but new figures are showing that, in fact, France is not doing quite so well. And the result is they've now stopped 44,000 fewer people getting across.
So where's our money going?
Well, this is a good question. I mean, the whole point of it. I mean, there are a variety of things we've got problems with the French with. One is that we'd like our border force people on French beaches to join the gendarmes patrolling them. The French don't like that with the sovereignty. We would like the French to stop the boats as they sail out. The French say maritime law prohibits them from doing that. There's some question about whether that's true or not.
Yeah.
And so what the French have agreed to do is stop the boats before they leave the coastline. What these figures are showing is they're not stopping quite as many as they perhaps should be. Now, of course, there could be a whole load of different reasons for this. That the bad weather has meant fewer crossings anyway, although the last couple of months, I mean, June was a record month, the last couple of months have been quite heavy. Earlier in the year, the bad weather was stopping people coming over, so maybe that's the reason for the figures. So perhaps it's a bit early to blame the French too much yet.
Well, OK, so let's look at some other figures. So a figure that came out this week in the Times on Tuesday, Candice, there are 20% less gendarmes patrolling the beaches in France because they're all on holiday. You couldn't make it up. They're literally on holiday and not doing their job, despite the fact they've had 500 million reasons to be at work.
Well, since last week when that boat sank and you read the reports of exactly what was going on, I mean, utter lawlessness on those beaches, I've noticed attitudes really hardening now, and people are saying, you know, you need to shut this down. How can you allow this to be going on? I mean, apparently there were people shooting guns. There was a 15-year-old boy who was on that boat. He said he was absolutely terrified. I mean, this whole industry, this whole trafficking industry is being run by the most unscrupulous people imaginable. And I just think responsible people need to get on top of this now.
There's another reason, isn't there, though, Nigel, why the French don't want to stop illegals leaving France, and that is it could cost Macron his presidency. Immigration is a huge issue domestically. Why on earth would he want to stop people leaving his country?
Yeah, well, I mean, there is that problem. I mean, when you think about it, the people who are coming to Calais aren't going there because they want to sightsee or be tourists. They're going there specifically to try and get across to the UK. And so, in general terms, it's in Macron's interest for them to do just that, to actually leave his country. So I think that if you think about putting the boot on the other foot, if this was happening here, we'd probably feel the same way.
Yes.
So I can understand why he feels the way he does, that essentially this is not a French problem. These people have passed through other safe countries before they've reached France. So you can understand that Macron is saying, well, why should we have to look after them?
Because they're already taking in a lot who are staying in.
Well, they're taking more than we are, yes.
Many more.
And also they process, I mean, they process their asylum seekers in half the time that we do.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're working very hard on doing it, but obviously because France is in Schengen area, people can cross borders very easily, their problem is greater than ours. You don't need a boat to get into France.
But then the big question is, if that's the case, if we take everything we've said now as true, then why on earth are we giving £500 million to a country that doesn't particularly want to help us? That's the big question. We should probably move on.
Yes, we should move on, because otherwise this is becoming a debate about that alone, and that just shows how important it is. However, Candice, it looks as though we will be able to pay to get our COVID boosters now.
Yeah, so that's the news this morning in the Times. You'll be able to get a COVID booster now for about £15 to £20 from pharmacies, private clinics. And what this shows is that our management of the disease is starting to become more normalised. So it's not just seen as an emergency thing. If you feel that you're vulnerable and the NHS is not going to provide a jab for you, then you can go and buy it for yourself, much like people do with flu jabs, for instance. And also what's very interesting is it says that though COVID is still around, you're seeing much fewer hospitalisations, so it's down from about 36 per 1,000 in 2021 to 3 per 1,000. So I think that's really incredible, actually, how far we've come.
It also ameliorises the sort of toxic debate about the government forcing us to have vaccines.
That's such a good point.
This now becomes a matter of choice.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
So, yeah. And I think that it's quite reasonable. If people are worried about and they want to buy a COVID jab, that's fine. I mean, I'm jabbed up to the eyeballs on the basis of the programme that was run for free. I'd only go and get a COVID jab now if I thought there was a variant coming which was particularly dodgy.
No, I'll go and get one. I'll pay 15 quid and just go and have it.
Whatever your position on the vaccines, I think it's a good thing that this is now a choice and not a mandate,
yes.
Particularly with children. That was the one thing that really got me. When I was getting letters through from my 13-year-old addressed directly to him, it really concerned me. So back to the realms of choice, has to be good.
Yeah, it has to be good. And as you say, it's a sign that we've moved on, which is a good thing too. Nigel, this extraordinary story about what's gone on at the British Museum.
I mean, it is just amazing. So the man who's allegedly responsible for this has been named Peter Higgs, who is the...
But just for the sake of anyone who doesn't know the story, what is alleged to have gone on?
What is alleged to have happened is over a number of years that artefacts worth tens of millions of pounds going back to 1500 BC have been nicked from the British Museum and sold on the open market. And it is an extraordinary story. Now, they're suggesting that the man responsible is a chap called Peter Higgs, who is the curator of the Greek collection, a world expert.
A world expert.
A world expert in this. In fairness, his son says, no, he's absolutely innocent. He's not been interviewed by the police or anything like that. He has been fired, so his 30-year career has gone down the tubes. But there's been no action against him. But even so, one wonders about the security there, that what the Daily Mail is saying is that there are... the security is not so good because if you want to go into the archives, there's no log to say who goes in. Well, those archives have got, priceless treasures in there.
Which are frankly never put on display.
That's right,
I mean, I think most museums, they have tons and tons of stuff, which is never put on display and just sort of kept in the caverns underneath.
Yeah, and it's for researchers to go and have a look at and things like that, because they've got too much material to actually show the public all of it. But obviously, this stuff is still obviously historically valuable.
How did they find out this was happening?
Not sure is the answer. They just
yes, that's what I was told, is that actually these things started to turn up on eBay.
Well, there's eBay. They were starting to turn up on the open market. There was somebody who spotted one of these things that he knew came from the British Museum up for open sale.
That strikes me as extraordinary. I mean, I'm no Indiana Jones, but
sure you are.
But I'd assume that eBay is not the best place to sell an ancient trinket.
No, well, that was the other part of the scandal, is that they have been sold, some of these things, for next to nothing.
Yeah.
No, I'm fascinated by this. What is this market in these ancient goods? Who's buying? Who's selling? Where are you displaying it? Is it because you're obsessed with ancient Greece and you just like to have these things in your house?
Well, if you bought something that looked good on eBay for a £5, you would want to display it on your mantelpiece. And yet here
more than a £5.
Here he goes. Its progeny may go back to the British Museum.
Yeah, but you're talking about, I mean, there are very rich people who like collecting these things, and they keep them in secret as well, but they just like looking at them and knowing that they're owning them.
Isn't it extraordinary? Anyway, as we say, he has not been charged with anything.
No, he's not.
But he is no longer working in that job.
But he has been fired.
And been named.
And he has been named. So he's not speaking, but his son is, who is outraged by the treatment his father has got.
It may not have been him. I guess we'll find out in the fullness of time.
But he may have been responsible for a lack of security. I mean, it could be anything.
Well, I mean, he wouldn't be... security wasn't his particular area, but he was allowed to go into the archives without being logged. So apparently all you need is a key. You go in, you can fiddle around with all the various things that are in there, and then no one monitors you. So there's a whole host of people who
And there
go
were
through.
photographs of him with these ancient Greek masks on, so he was playing around with them. He had a bit of a laxity.
Well, you would, wouldn't you? If you worked in a museum, you would have tried all the bits and pieces.
But it's a fascinating story. It's going to be a movie in the future, no doubt.
Oh, yes, it will.
Candice, we talked about yesterday the grade inflation being reversed on A-levels, leaving a lot of people disappointed or even unable to get to university.
This is quite sad. I mean, yesterday was a very exciting day for a lot of pupils, but for some, I mean, apparently about 5,000 fewer pupils this year received A-star grades. In total, the number of kids receiving A to A-star grades dropped from 35.9% to 26.5%. So that's pretty significant, actually.
It's still above pandemic levels, though, so still you could say artificially up.
You could say that, but I feel very sorry for this generation. I feel like they've had to take quite a lot of knocks. Maybe it'll make them more resilient, and in the future they'll be able to handle difficulty a lot better than, say, previous generations did. So maybe we shouldn't get too down on them. But they've had a lot to deal with at a very young age.
The better response surely would just be to say, right, we're going to, what the government says, they're going to be more apprenticeships open for you, more opportunities to learn as you work. I think that's by far
Also, there's the whole point that this is all a legacy of Tony Blair, who wanted 50% of people to go to university. It doesn't suit everybody.
No.
And it may well be, there's an awful lot of people are dropping out now who got the inflated grades back
When you went
during
into
COVID.
the adult workplace, were you ever asked what your A-level or O-level results were?
I've never been asked once what academic qualifications I've got.
Me either.
No.
Never asked.
See, Gillian Keegan was criticised so much for saying that, but she's telling the truth.
Yes, she
actually.
is telling the truth.
And it's important. Kids need to hear that. Like you were saying, there's so much emphasis on academic achievement, but there's a wide variety of abilities out there, and we need to start treasuring them.
Yeah. Actually, that's one to ask you at home. When was the last time you were ever asked how many A-levels, O-levels, GCSEs or whatever
Never.
you had?
Yeah, never.
Usually, when you go for an interview for a job, all they want to know is your experience and what you're like, really. I've never been asked, never been checked.
Well, I was only asked at my university interview. That was it.
Yeah, exactly. You'd expect that, wouldn't you?
Yeah. You got
That's
the
how you
grades,
get into university.
That is literally it.
Yeah. Yes.
From that moment, I was 19, 18, never been asked since, and I'm nowhere near 19 now.
No, Michael Parkinson, who we're all celebrating the life of so much today, left school with 2 O-levels.
Your personality counts for so much in life, your work ethic, all these things, these so-called soft skills, they're actually highly valuable.
And it was great yesterday because, of course, Jeremy Clarkson tweets every year about the fact that he didn't get any A-level. And he always says, and I have a Ferrari, but this year he said, and I own my own brewery. Can you organise a in a brewery?
In a brewery, absolutely.
I bet he could.
Yeah.
He's got no A-levels.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter for people like him.
And unfortunately, while Tony Blair might have thought he was saying doing the right thing and wishing the right thing, he's actually left generations of kids with huge debt.
Yes, I mean, that's the other problem,
And I just think that, and I know the argument is it's not the same sort of debt or you don't have to pay it off but it is debt.
But I think that's absolutely right.
To teach young people to leave university at 21, 22 with enormous debt on their shoulder, I think that's no way to start
an
a life.
apprenticeship instead, at least you'll get paid.
Yeah.
So, an apprenticeship now is actually a reasonable alternative to going to university.
Yeah.
And I bang on about this every time A-levels comes up with university, but the least likely demographic to attend university in the UK are white working-class boys, and they're the ones who are terrified of taking on 50 grand's worth of debt. And so it's a huge barrier for them to go to university. University tends to favour those who are already well off. I think the whole system needs to be looked at. I got a full grant when I was a student.
Yes.
I got, the government paid for me to go to university as the first person in my family. I've repaid that many, many times in tax, and that helped the disadvantaged at the bottom. That system's entirely gone now, and we're saddling kids with debt, and it's so scary they don't even bother attending.
Well, the problem now is with the cost of living, there's just nowhere to move. So people have got their student debt, high mortgage costs, high bills. I mean, it's impossible. It's an impossible situation. And if you've got a degegree from a very lowly ranked university, that's actually quite a negative signal.
It's almost something to have to overcome now,
yes.
isn't it? Yeah. So if we very quickly then, Nigel, look at whether Rishi can help us all by bringing in tax cuts, because the Daily Express reckons he can.
Yes, the Daily Express does, and I think the Daily Express is wrong. What the Daily Express is saying is that that the Treasury will have £30 billion extra because of higher wages coming in, so people are paying more tax. You've got a freeze on national insurance and tax thresholds, so more people are being drawn into tax, and all this has become a bit of a windfall for Jeremy Hunt. Problem is, we still have inflation, 6.8%, probably going to be an interest rate rise in September again to cope with it. The worst thing you could do now is lower taxes until we've conquered inflation.
But the best thing you could do now as a Conservative Prime Minister is to dangle a tax cut to Conservative voters, because we've got the highest tax regime since World War II. If we were any more taxed, we'd be a socialist state. So surely it is a good thing for a Conservative Prime Minister to be dangling out there, though, Nigel?
Well, he was the one who actually froze all these thresholds for 4 years because he reckoned he couldn't afford it. I mean, you may be right. If you dangle it out there, the electorate might be much more willing to vote for you. However, it could be a lie. I mean, it could wreck the economy if you do something wrong like that.
The issue is whether you think this inflation that we've got now is fueled by extra demand, so people having more money, whether it's external factors, energy costs, the energy shock from the war in Ukraine, Ukraine. And I think there's some disagreement about that. But Rishi Sunak is just being so cautious.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to be seen to be doing anything to make inflation worse right now. So I don't think there'll be any tax cuts until they've got it right down.
Well, look, before we say goodbye to you, the most important question of the day is, Nigel first, is Sunday morning's World Cup final as important as 1966?
Yes. Simple as that. I just think that there's not been as much interest in the Lionesses because of the time difference to Australia. Suddenly, now they're in the final.
Perfect.
It's a whole different thing.
Perfect for
and if we
us,
win
isn't it?
that, yes, it's 1966 all over again.
What about you?
Oh, absolutely. Girl power.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Good. Martin, you are not doing so well here.
I'm the voice of reason, I think, this morning. But anyway.
No, I really don't think so. I think go with the times. Anyway, that's one still for you. We've had so many views about it. So thank you so much. Martin's wrong, says Graham. Why aren't women playing for their country as important as men? They have raised the profile enormously and they deserve respect for reaching the final. Hear, hear. Don't go away, we've got plenty more for you. First of all, let's catch up with the weather.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office. It's a windy start to the day and you'll notice the humidity out there, even if it's not especially sunny. That humidity, along with some instability, courtesy of low pressure to the southwest, leading to the risk of thunderstorms across central and southern parts during the morning this morning. Could cause some impacts with frequent lightning and some intense bursts of rain, but as always, these thunderstorms will be hit and miss, and they do tend to die away as they push northeastwards during the morning. Northern Scotland staying fine, southwest England largely fine as well. Some sunshine coming through, but a lot of cloud and a strong wind, especially for northwest Wales. 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts could impact people on their holidays, for example. Then, well, it gets very lively overnight. A band of heavy rain moves into southwestern areas. That pushes into the rest of England, into Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by midnight. And at the same time, there's the risk of some serious thunderstorms developing across eastern England. Frequent lightning, large hail, intense outbreaks of rain. It's also going to be a windy night and a muggy night. 18, 19 Celsius across some parts of southern UK and mid to high teens widely by dawn across many parts of the country. Heavy persistent rain then moves into parts of Scotland, especially the north and the east. Further spells of rain or showers across Northern Ireland, the rest of Scotland, northern England. A quieter picture for the rest of England and Wales. Sunny spells and showers by and large, and still some warmth in that sun. In the southeast, highs of 25 or 26 degrees.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Friday, the 18th of August. Today, the government has laid out steps to protect the use of cash across the country after GB News' Don't Kill Cash campaign reached over 300,000 signatures and was delivered to number 11.
And of course, tributes have poured in after former talk show host and legendary journalist Sir Michael Parkinson died at the age of 88. We will look back at his journey as one of the most famous, if not the most famous names in the UK.
And will you pay for a jab to rewire your brain and reduce your addiction to alcohol? Scientists say the early stage tests on monkeys have been incredibly effective.
And of course, the weekend is on the way. How will the weather look this time? Here's Aidan McGivern from the Met Office with your report.
The humidity is rising, low pressure is edging closer. Some very lively weather expected later today. I'll have more in the forecast.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot of rain, so we all need cheering up. So welcome. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Telling you about a really weird thing that's been happening and has been reported in the Times today. I think we got a picture. If you go out this weekend to one of those big sunflower meadows, big sunflower fields, apparently they are aware now that people have got a penchant for taking their clothes off and taking selfies in amongst the sunflowers. So much so that they're having to put out warnings because families who are taking their children around the sunflower fields are finding that they're getting more than they thought. That's prompted some interesting stories from you, thank you. Carol has emailed in, she says, not in a sunflower field, but my neighbours went to Greece and they did a boat trip that ended up on a nudist beach. And as they walked up the beach, they bumped into another neighbour stood there in all his glory. They didn't know where to tell the kids to look.
I've got a funny nudist beach story.
Oh, yes?
Yeah, I was in Spain. My mum had got an apartment there, and we were driving around trying to find a supermarket, and we strayed into this German nudist resort. And people were walking around the streets with bags of shopping, absolutely...
What, the whole resort then, the shops and...
Stalkers, they were stalkers walking around the street. And we came around a corner and there was a bloke bent over, cleaning out his car, fully stalkers, and I got a full view of his glove box. And it was really, really startling. And then we went away, quite shocked, and next day I thought, should we go back? And so we went to the beach. And
What, fully clothed?
Yeah, but then got involved in the nudist.
Oh, you did?
And I was so embarrassed, I lay face down for about 4 hours and got totally
sunburned on your back.
I couldn't go through with it.
Do you know, I think people who say they stumble across nudist beaches are maybe telling porkies, don't you?
Had it all planned.
Yeah, I don't think they stumble at all. I think they're curious and go and have a look. Anyway, if you've got your nudist beach story, keep it clean, send it in. The football on Sunday morning. Oh, my goodness, that's dividing people. It's also memories of 1966. My question to you is Sunday morning as eventful a moment? Is it as important as 1966 was? He doesn't think so. No. Janet says, I was 8 in 1966 and in Italy camping with my family. We were one English family surrounded by local Italians and Germans also on holiday. The Italians were cheering for the England team. I'm not a watcher of football, just the national tournaments, and I think this World Cup is just as momentous as 1966.
And Linda says, I agree with you, Martin. In my opinion, the women's final is not on a par with the 1966 final. I have no interest in football, but I could name all of the players in that legendary 66 final, and it's probably one of the only matches I've ever watched. I was 15 and we sat as a family. It was so exciting and such a great afternoon, but she's saying it's not on par with the Lionesses.
No, I didn't watch it, but my best friend, her father, bought probably what was the first colour television in our town for that, because he was a football referee, so he's very keen. I know he and the whole street were in their living room watching it and thought it was wonderful. But I don't remember being interested at the time. Tony says, when I was a boy, born in 1962, until recently it was unusual to hear of a ladies' team anywhere near. Kids, both male and female these days, find it completely normal to play football. That's the progress that football has brought people together and made friendships they would never otherwise have known. My granddaughter, he says, Madeline Charlton, plays, and she loves it. That's a good name for a footballer, isn't it? Yeah, she's really good too. He says, I hope she dreams of playing professionally one day. Who knows? The point is, she can dream of it now.
Yeah, and it is amazing that the Lionesses have switched a lot of young girls. My daughter's really into football now. She's 9, she loves it. And it absolutely is a great thing to switch young girls on via this, but I just don't think it's up there with the 66 final.
Well, that's your opinion that counts, rather than his today. GB Views at gbnews.com. Is Sunday morning as important an event for us, as a whole nation, really, as 1966 was?
OK, let's move on now to our top story this morning. GB News' Don't Kill Cash campaign is already yielding results. Overnight, the Treasury has announced plans to assure access to cash facilities. More than 300,000 of you, and rising, have signed our petition to save pound sterling coins and banknotes from extinction and to slow the move towards a cashless society.
Well, yesterday, GB News presenters delivered the petition in person to the Treasury at number 11 Downing Street. And within a matter of hours, they said they will require people and businesses to be no more than 3 miles away from a cash withdrawal machine or a deposit centre, and they will even give the Financial Conduct Authority powers to fine banks who don't comply with that.
And GB News' political editor, the legendary Christopher Hope, is live in Downing Street for us now. Top of the morning to you, Chopper. Look, this is a great result for GB News. Literally overnight, just a few hours ago, Nigel Farage and the rest of the GB News crew were hammering on that door behind you, and already we've seen firm action. How significant is this victory?
I think it's part of the way there, Martin. The campaign we've got, Don't Kill Cash, is about the right to legal tender, being able to spend money where you want to, hard money, because not all of us, let's face it, carry cards and can do it through cash only. But what they're doing here is they're using some measures in the Financial Services and Markets Act 2023 to require people to be able to get hold of cash and have a space for that within 3 miles of anywhere in the country. My warning, though, on this is that is the same requirement as for post offices. So there's 11,500 post offices around the country. Legally, they must be within 3 miles of any community living here. That is all this change is doing overnight. It will require access to cash within 3 miles. And I wonder whether banks could say, well, there's a post office there, therefore we needn't provide a branch. So while it's a good news, there's a warning there, I think, but it doesn't go much further than the current status quo. This campaign must carry on, Martin.
That's interesting you say the campaign must carry on. We've got to be plain about it. We're not campaigning, or the people who've already signed the petition aren't campaigning to only have cash, but cash should live alongside other forms of payment.
Exactly.
I'm glad you agree.
That's quite right. Not everyone is well, no, Anne, but you're right, of course, because not everyone is used to having a PIN code and can remember the PIN number and can use the card, and they like having cash. Cash is a way often for many people to slow down spending. I certainly find it, if I'm holding a tenner, I'm less inclined to want to spend it. If it's digits on a PIN reader, the money flies out of the pocket much quicker. So I think, particularly now in a cost of living crisis, cash is an important way for families to budget. So that's part of the story, but I think that generally, it matters to be able to spend cash and have access in shops.
And Chris, Tom in Norfolk has sent in a great point to us here. I think it's great that the Treasury said that they plan to save cash, but please don't fall for a politician's promise. We've heard it so many times before. So putting it to you, Chris, somebody who understands intimately how Number 10 works. They're very good at adopting or co-opting or absorbing ideas that are effective for a quick win, but we need to keep the pressure applied on this, don't we? We need to keep pushing on.
Well, that's right. I've been reading through the small print of the announcement this morning, and that's why I'm a bit concerned it doesn't give us the full result that this campaign, what these people who sign the campaign want. What we do want to have, or what they want, is access to cash in shops and access to legal tender, but all they're getting is the fact that they can withdraw money within 3 miles of anywhere in this country, which is all that the Post Office network gives them. But the language from politicians today, from Andrew Griffith, the senior Treasury Minister, is very supportive of what this campaign is trying to do, but the small print isn't there yet. So so Tom in Norfolk is correct. Hold your horses on declaring victory.
Well, before we say goodbye to you, I just want to comment on the fact it's great to see the England bunting outside number 10, isn't it? With the 3 lions there. And it just shows that, the spirit inside number 10 is at least showing faithful to the Lionesses. Great stuff. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Exactly right.
Thank you.
See, yesterday they were hanging that bunting out, and I thought, oh, how nice of them to put the bunting out.
You thought it was for GB News?
For Nigel Farage. I thought, no, that's nice to lay on a little welcome, but it wasn't for that, of course. It's for the Lionesses.
And, of course, it's interesting to see number 10 sort of declaring, you know, good on you, Lionesses, by hanging the bunting there. What we haven't heard yet is whether or not Prince William is going to go to Sydney to see the final, because he is chairman of FIFA.
Yeah, but you've got a theory of the FA. You've got a theory, though. You think he's just going to rock up, don't you?
Well, he's on holiday officially at the moment, and we don't know where he's on holiday. And I think he was probably waiting to see if the Lionesses would get in to the final, and then he'll probably be making his way to Sydney. I think he would do it.
He'll get so much stick if he doesn't.
Well, it's a very odd thing if he doesn't, because as many people are pointing out, he would turn up for if the men had got into the men's world final. So he's got to, really, hasn't he? I think he probably is on his way already.
But he might go to the men's final because it's just more entertaining than the women's. That's a separate point.
No, you see, no, you must not say that.
We're just having fun with this all morning, and you've certainly been getting back to us in your droves. Is the women's game up there with the men's? It's certainly got them going, Anne.
Yeah, and should the pubs be opening early and allowed to serve alcohol from at least 11, which is kick-off time?
Yeah, super.
OK. Now let's talk about a man who's close to all of our hearts, which are breaking for him this morning, or breaking for his family, because tributes are pouring in for Sir Michael Parkinson, one of Britain's most celebrated broadcasters and journalists. He's died at the age of 88.
Yeah, in a legendary television career spanning 7 decades, Sir Michael, fondly called Parky by friends and fans, and indeed most of the public, became one of the greatest interviewers, if not the greatest, of all time with his long-running chat show.
Yeah, it's interesting, because all his famous programmes were always called Parkinson, but everybody called him Parky. We're joined now in the studio by Stephanie Tecchi. Hi, Stephanie. Who's looking fabulous in... You're the only ray of sunshine at the moment. Yeah, I mean, he is literally a national treasure.
He is, and I think that's why people called him Parky, because I think that the nation had this affection for him. At the height of Parkinson, he was attracting up to 17 million viewers watching his interviews. Because
I know, nobody in television gets that anymore, because there are more channels, basically.
And, you know, Tim Davie, the head of the BBC, he said that, you know, he is the king of chat. He was the king of chat, but also he set the precedents for TV interviews that a lot of presenters have been following. And, you know, through tributes, people have said he is a one-off. I think it'll be hard to replicate his style, his authenticity and his charm. Sir Rod Stewart says that in all of his career, he's hated TV interviews. But he said with Parky, he just looked forward to their chats because he was authentic both on screen and off screen.
Yeah. What you saw on screen was what you got in real life. And Sir David Attenborough said the same thing,
Yeah, he said it was like being interviewed by a friend, and I think that was really his success, that people could relate to him, because when you think about celebrity interviews these days, they're very salacious. Celebrities always have their backup because they don't know which way it's going to go, but he just had a knack of being natural. Then for him to tame the tiger that is Muhammad Ali, and they're having a verbal spar, it's just incredible TV, and it's TV gold that I can imagine the BBC now going through the archives of 2,000 plus interviews. There's a lot there.
We've got a lovely picture of you meeting him. What was that occasion?
So he actually written a book about his time interviewing Muhammad Ali, because there was that famous interview he did with him, but he actually stayed in touch with Muhammad Ali over the years since the interview. He interviewed him again quite a few times. So
4 times.
It was 4 times. So it was based on their interactions.
Have we got that picture of you with... Parky? I don't know.
And there's one I think of you as well. And in the meantime...
No, we haven't got it at the moment. We'll show them a bit later.
The thing that I just adore about him is he was a proper journalist. He started on the local press in Yorkshire. He was in cricket journalism, then the Manchester Guardian, then the Observer, then the Sunday Times. And the thing about him writing about sport is he always wrote about his beloved Barnsley. And always stayed in touch.
And they had a minute's silence for Michael Parkinson yesterday, Sir Michael Parkinson yesterday. And also they said it felt like they've lost one of their sons, and he was very passionate about cricket as well. Actually, before wanting to be a journalist, he wanted to be a cricketer, so he really brought a lot to the game, and he just had that warm northern hospitality.
I think we have that picture of you now, Steph. You with Parky.
Yeah.
That's a lovely one. You're wearing the same colour.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's been quite inspirational in my career in terms of, you know, I think a lot of showbiz gets a bad rep of just being about gossip, but he actually brought it credibility, and that, you know what, as a journalist, you can get good interviews with celebrities and good stories, but he wasn't just about the celebrity, he interviewed all walks of life.
Well, shall we speak now to Barry Taylor, who's Honorary Life President of Barnsley Football Club. And a very good morning to you. A sad morning, I mean, but he lived a great life, I must say. What are your thoughts this morning?
Well, first of all, Barnsley Football Club is sad because Michael was a great supporter and a friend of Barnsley Football Club, and it's just condolences go to all the family. It's such a sad occasion. Michael was a wonderful character, a great writer, a Barnsley legend from Cudworth for the local lads. It's a sad loss, and he once told me his greatest sporting achievement at the age of 17 was when he kept Geoffrey Boycott out of the Barnsley cricket team. He then added that Boycott was 12 at the time.
And the thing about Parky, Barry, is that even when he got into the national stage, he always kept writing about Barnsley. It was something that was very passionate about, you know, Yorkshire cricket. He once turned down an invite to go to the Playboy Mansion instead to play cricket in Yorkshire on a village green. That was a guy who never lost touch with his roots.
That's true. I mean, I started watching Barnsley when Michael was writing for the Barnsley Chronicle. And he always talking about Skinner Normanton, Johnny Kelly, Danny Blanchflower, Tommy Taylor, Duncan Sharp. I met him many times when Barnsley played Reading, of course, and I did used to chide him that he was a season ticket holder at Reading. But I also met him many times when Barnsley played at Wembley, and we always had good conversation about his early Barnsley days. He was an absolute brilliant person to meet.
I suppose it's a silly thing to say about somebody who is now celebrated for his being king of chat, but he was very, very easy to speak to, wasn't he? And to have an ordinary conversation with. It wasn't like having a conversation with a celebrity. He just made it just an ordinary chit-chat.
That's exactly what he was like. I mean, I only met him at football matches, but we just, as soon as he saw me, straight in about Barnsley.
Yeah, and remembered names and faces from past and present, didn't he?
That was his best. He could remember names. That was one of his things, that he could remember everybody. And, you know, straight on, hello, Barry, how are you? Oh, Michael Parkinson, you know.
And Barry, we understood there was a minute's silence before the match. What was the mood amongst the terraces and the fans? What were people saying to you about Parky?
Well, we've not. The match is tomorrow, actually, so I don't know where that's come from. There will probably be a minute's silence tomorrow before the match at Barnsley.
What are people saying in the community, in the Barnsley community, about Parky to you?
Well, they all think the same. I mean, the people of my age, of course, remember him through his career, through the Barnsley Chronicle, the Manchester Guardian. You know, they just remember him all his life. And the fact that he was from the pit village, and he never, ever forgot that. He was just a good person to meet and speak to.
Yeah, he was the son and the grandson of a miner. Didn't go down the pit himself, and with 2 O-levels, it's a wonder he made it into any profession at all, but he did, and he proved himself for the rest of his life, didn't he, really?
He did, and Barnsley Football Club, it's a wonderful provincial town club, but he never forgot it, and he always mentioned it. it was wonderful.
Yeah. He always dropped it in there, didn't he? But it's said that he was more keen on cricket. I don't know. Is that right?
Well, yes, and you used to tell me a story about opening at Barnsley Cricket Club with with Dickie Bird. And if I once saw him and Dickie Bird to give a show at one of the local hotels, and Dickie Bird was so funny, Michael had got tears running down his cheeks. It was a fantastic evening with both of them speaking about cricket.
Well, like we were saying, it's sad to note his death, but that was a heck of a life, wasn't it? And you've got so many lovely memories too. Thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to talk to you.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Barry Taylor there, Honorary Life President of Barnsley Football Club. Oh, should we, on that sort of note, I should catch up with the weather, shall we?
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office. It's a windy start to the day, and you'll notice the humidity out there, even if it's not especially sunny. That humidity, along with some instability, courtesy of low pressure to the southwest, leading to the risk of thunderstorms across central and southern parts during the morning this morning. Could cause some impacts with frequent lightning and some intense bursts of rain, but as always, these thunderstorms will be hit and miss, and they do tend to die away as they push northeastwards during the morning. Northern Scotland staying fine, southwest England largely fine as well. Some sunshine coming through, but a lot of cloud and a strong wind, especially for northwest Wales. 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts could impact people on their holidays, for example. Then, well, it gets very lively overnight. A band of heavy rain moves into southwestern areas. That pushes into the rest of England, into Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by midnight. And at the same time, there's the risk of some serious thunderstorms developing across eastern England. Frequent lightning, large hail, intense outbreaks of rain. It's also going to be a windy night and a muggy night. 18, 19 Celsius across some parts of southern UK and mid to high teens widely by dawn across many parts of the country. Heavy persistent rain then moves into parts of Scotland, especially the north and the east. Further spells of rain or showers across Northern Ireland, the rest of Scotland, northern England. A quieter picture for the rest of England and Wales. Sunny spells and showers by and large, and still some warmth in that sun. In the southeast, highs of 25 or 26 degrees.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
There you go. OK, plenty more to come. But before that...
You came back to us a little bit sharp there.
Coit is here.
Sort of people you're not meant to see, but that's all right. Yeah, no,
what's going on? We're on air.
Yeah. We're on air. We're on air, chaps. We're still on air.
They're so excited about getting involved in today's programme. But look, before we go to Corty, let's talk about pubs on Sunday, because we asked you, should the pubs open for the Lionesses? And it just seems a unanimous yes.
Granville in Bristol says, why is Sunday any different to a weekday or a Saturday? Every other aspect of business operates freely on a Sunday. These antiquated laws need updating.
And Brian, I know about this, Brian. Pubs in my area, Southend-on-Sea, are open at 10 a.m. Why did the licensees not apply for a special licence? Those pubs at 10 a.m. in Southend, trust me, they're quite lively.
The only trouble is if you do have to apply for a special licence now, you've only got today to do it, I would have thought. Lee in Portsmouth says, yes, the pubs should be allowed to open early in our free society. It's a great British tradition.
Yeah, and Dawn is all for saying cheers to Lionesses too. She's saying this is a massive event for England.
Massive event.
Yes, the pub should be open early. They were open for the London Marathon.
Well, yeah, that's the point. You've been giving us your views on whether Sunday morning for the Lionesses World Cup final is as big as 1966. It'll be interesting to put that to Paul Coit after the break.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 26 minutes past 7. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin.
Yeah, well, we've got loads of views coming in, and the women's football, the Lionesses final, of course, on Sunday, 11 o'clock. Is it as important as 1966? It's absolutely got them going berserk.
Russell makes a very interesting point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Russell. The Women's World Cup is far more important than the last 1966 World Cup, as women's football is in its infancy and has already raised the interest to millions of women and young girls. That's an interesting point.
I think the pubs are already open for Russell. I think he's already had a couple.
Stop it.
I mean, come on, let's get this in perspective. It's a massive game, but 66 was the all-time pinnacle.
It was a heck of a long time ago.
Yeah, it is. We could do with a victory, I do agree. Belinda says this, why is the UK not behind the Lionesses as they have been for the men in World Cups? Quite simply, we've been let down by men's football in every major championship since the 60s. It's a fair point.
Yeah, she said it's hard to get motivated behind the women as the men have already set the failure bar quite low. Well, there's a lot to talk about here. So shall we put this to Paul Coit, who joins us now in the studio? So I put the same
No pressure
question...
on me, then, to answer this
the same
whatsoever.
question I've been putting all morning to everybody listening and watching. Is Sunday morning Women's World Cup final as important a moment to you as 1966?
To me, I was a year out from 66, but I don't think it is. I think it's extremely important, yes, for different reasons, but the thing is you've got to look at the different reasons. Like you said just now, it's very important for women's football, hugely important. There's either important or is the occasion bigger? If you think 1966, the World Cup was here, so it was being held here. And again, it took a while for everybody to buy into. I remember speaking to Jeff Hurst about this. And he said that at the time, although we now look back and think it was the greatest moment in our sporting history, at the time, when the group games were going, people weren't paying as much attention as people thought they may be, if we look back now. By the time England got to the semi-final and then they got to the final, then the whole country was interested.
Yes.
We've seen that for years anyway.
Yes.
You know, early days.
Well, we were seeing it now.
Exactly. And also the fact that it's over in Australia, I think it makes a difference, the fact that it is early in the morning and people are less likely. I mean, if you look at the Euros, I think the reaction to the Lionesses in the Euros is bigger than actually seeing the World Cup now, although obviously...
See, I disagree.
The
I
World
think
Cup is the
it's
biggest
Sunday, it's in the morning. That means families can watch together on Sunday morning, and we can all be excited because we've got the day off anyway to watch it.
Sure.
I think it's bigger.
Well...
But you say... Sorry, you say
it's
bigger,
the World Cup final.
I love the fact, but the thing is, it doesn't really matter what time it is. Families would still be together. If it was in the evening, we'd be watching it together. I don't think that makes the whole situation big.
Oh, come on. 1966 was only against West Germany.
Well, but that actually was a huge reason why the final became so significant. It was only like less than 20 years after, after the World War II ended. And it became, you know, don't mention the war. It did become...
Oh, come on, that's nothing to do with it.
It absolutely
I don't
was.
buy that,
it absolutely
really.
was. It was the first major World Cup final between England and Germany just after the war. It took on a significance beyond the match, and it brought everyone together. As you said, people were buying TVs on their street for the first time.
We got so excited about it in '66 that they even persuaded the Queen to actually watch it, go and watch it in Wembley. And football was never her sport.
And of course, and then there's the famous moment there with the Queen, hands over the World Cup. Bobby Moore wipes his hand before he then shakes hand. I mean, that's the thing. This is down in legend, and the reason it is legend is because we've only won the World Cup once.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
That's why we know the Germans you could pick up any time.
But that's my argument. We're making it bigger than Sunday morning because it hasn't happened since '66.
I'm not even...
It's only a legend because it was so long ago.
I'm not even comfortable with the fact that we can even compare the two. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I know we're saying, well, is it this or is it that? It's a fantastic thing that we have done, and since 2015, since this is when people started really paying attention to the women's game, the World Cup, and how the Lionesses did, and started people calling them Lionesses. 2019, and then the Euros, and the thing is, we're now turning into the force in the game, whereas always it's been the United States, because America saw it more as a girls' game, football or soccer, as they would call it over there. And so now we've moved in, like, it's getting better and better. So it's hugely important to us. But to compare it is tricky.
Both of you guys are saying it's basically not as important because it's women.
That's not true.
And that's patronising.
That's not true. I never said that.
They're playing, come on, they're playing a sport to a world standard here. If it were any other sport, you'd be lauding them completely.
No, I think
it's football.
I am absolutely lauding them.
Yeah, but you see it as a men's thing. And, you know, frankly, the women have transgressed into a men's thing.
I don't think it's that.
That is so unfair. Honestly, you might as well be kicking me under the desk while you're doing this. I've spent all week saying how important it is, and I've been very much behind it. And I think everybody is.
Yeah, but you're only saying that.
That's the easy thing to say, is to go, oh, well, see, the thing is, men and football supporters, they don't look at it right, and that's not fair.
And I'm not putting down women's football uniquely, because
he is. I just want to make that clear.
Because I also think the blokes' tennis is better. Let's move on. Quickly moving on, because England are now so successful.
I'm sorry, I'm having a wobbly now. Can't believe it.
The Lionesses are now successful. Of course, they're swooping in to try and nick the gaffer. Your top story here.
Well, again, this is a story which I think is sort of based in a very small amount of truth. Serena Wiegman, of course, and she has been amazing, and she's a fantastic manager. We were talking to Harry Redknapp on the show yesterday, and I just want to know how much and how important it is that you've got. Is a manager purely about their football nous, or is it about how they deal with players? And with her, it's pretty much everything. She's got the whole team together.
She has.
And so Mark Bullingham, who's the chief executive of the FA, he was asked the question. You know, would there be a possibility that she could then take over the men's side? He's not going to go, no. He's going to say, well, of course it's a possibility. So then everybody would jump on it and go, she's going to be the next manager. It's very unlikely. But then also the other thing that he's saying, I'd be interested in what you think about this, Anne, to say that it's disrespectful, it's not a step up. We don't see it as a step up to the men's game. Now, that is where I would say it would be a step.
You see, that's where I don't think that's fair.
OK, there I'll give you that. But
look, we've spent so much time on that, and obviously this is very important to everybody watching as well. So we want to hear your views on this. It's views@gbnews.com. Can we briefly talk about Tsitsipas and the bee?
I know, how bizarre is this?
This is a tennis player, obviously.
So, this is Stefanos Tsitsipas, and this is in Cincinnati yesterday. So it's the western and Southern Open. So he's playing Ben Shelton, who's an American tennis player. Anyway, Tsitsipas walks over to serve, and he's got his tennis racket. He starts swatting because they're thinking, oh, what is it? Is there a bee? There's a fly? He's hearing a buzzing noise. He looks around, can't see anything. Anyway, there's a spectator sitting behind going... every time
trying to put him off.
Every time he's going to serve.
Every time he's going to serve. So he hears it. Then he goes over to the umpire, says, it's a person over there. And then the umpire's like, well, I don't know what to do. I've never seen this before. And Tsitsipas is saying, well, I've never had to play against this. Well, I don't think anybody's had someone making a buzzing noise. Gone over to the crowd. He's pointing out. He's saying, which one was it? There's a guy sitting behind. Now, look, it's the woman there, I think, on the bottom right. For those on the radio, we just pretty much it's just a picture of a few spectators. There's a guy that's sitting behind that actually pointed down, without saying anything, go, it's her. It was that one. So he wanted her thrown out. And the umpire has said, look, no, I'm not going to throw her out. Could you please keep quiet? Making buzzing noises. Put him off.
And for those who can't see the picture, it's the one in the black and yellow stripes with the big antennae.
That's the one, yeah.
She was asked to apologise to him, and I think she did.
I think so, yeah.
That's so right.
I'm really sorry for making buzzing noise.
I hope it doesn't start, a thing.
A trend. Oh, I don't know. I quite liked it, actually.
It's good
fun. I quite liked it.
Buzz off.
Your favourite insect noise? Trying to put off your players. Can you imagine how McEnroe would have reacted?
Well, Coity, you've come in and ruffled a few feathers. Well done. That's what
you know, I should do what I can. You know, I'm really excited about Sunday. But seriously, it's huge. We can't say how huge it is. Enormous. We'll all be down the pub then. Obviously, whether we can get a drink or not is another...
that's another issue entirely.
Coffee, I don't care. I just want to see him win, and I think they will.
Oh, I suppose after all that, we ought to take a break. Up next, all the other news stories making the headlines in today's papers. You're watching Breakfast.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
Please stop. Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. 39 minutes past 7, or does that make it 21 minutes to 8?
Both.
Yeah. OK, welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin. Before we get into the papers, can I just read out one of our lovely views this morning? Michelle, thank you, Michelle. She said, it was my first birthday in 1966 on the day of the World Cup. And my godmother, who's my cousin, got married that day. My dad said all the men were furious, so they were all outside the church listening to the radio. Needless to say, though, it was a very good party.
Superb. And Terry, thanks, Dave, for agreeing with me on this one. What made 66 special was that it was against the old enemy, Germany. If this game, the Lionesses, was against Germany, then you might argue that it is more important, but it's not. So Terry's making the case for it's who you're playing against that makes it so special.
No, you can't say that
I think
anymore.
he's got a point.
1966 was a very long time ago, as was the war. It's about time we've probably stopped talking about the two when it comes to football. Should we go through the papers now, see what's inside them? Joining us this morning, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth. And thank you very much for joining us again. So we're kicking off, Nigel, with an own goal in The Sun.
Indeed, and what The Sun is saying is that Rishi Sunak and Prince William have decided that they won't be going to the World Cup final in Australia.
Have they actually announced that and said that? Or is that just The Sun thinking that?
The Sun seem to be pretty certain that's what's going to happen. So, I mean, I think that it's unlikely they would go, actually. I mean, I can't quite see where Rishi Sunak was sticking in his diary. And according to The Sun, William is actually worried about increasing his carbon footprint by flying 9,500 miles down there. But as we said earlier, if this is the biggest football occasion for this country since 1966, then the future king and the Prime Minister ought to be there.
And the future king being President, Chairman of the FA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He should be there.
Yes.
Be there.
So on that basis there, and I'll bet you if this was taking place at Wembley, you wouldn't be able to keep them away.
Well, no.
If it was the men's final, they would be there, 100%. They need to go. I think they should be there. If the trade-offs, carbon emissions versus recognising women's sports, you choose recognising women's sports.
The Queen of Spain is going, isn't she?
Yes, that's right.
I think she's taking her daughter, and I think it's really important that when her team look up at the stands, they'll see their Queen there supporting them.
Yes.
When our team are looking up at the stands, who are they going to see?
I don't think it's dismal. It's dismal that
Lucy Fraser, the culture secretary,
they're making a choice between either appearing sexist or damaging the planet. That's where we're at. It's that hierarchy of grievances.
Or Prince William is playing it clever and waiting till there's an outcry that Prince William might not be there, and therefore that would justify him and his carbon footprint in flying quickly.
Well, we've got a day to go where they could change their mind.
He needs to be on that plane now, doesn't he, really?
He might parachute in, like at the Olympics. OK, let's move on, Candice, to a more serious story, but one that I think is well overdue. Let professionals help, and the Metropolitan Police are to stop attending mental health call-outs.
Yes, so this has just been announced that the police are going to focus more on fighting crime, and they're going to leave helping people in mental health crisis to medical professionals. So this is based on a pilot scheme that took place in Humberside called Right Care, Right Person.
Yep.
And they believe it could free up as much as 10,000 hours for policemen. And what a lot of people have said, it's actually better for people who need help, because a lot of police officers aren't trained in those situations. They don't necessarily know how to calm the situation down, whereas someone who's medically trained does. And I'm so interested in this because a very close family member of mine suffered from psychosis, and one of the issues is if you don't have a properly trained person to help you, it can make the psychosis so much worse. You need someone calm, kind, empathetic. I just hope, though, that the NHS is able to provide the resources, because there's nothing scarier than when you've got a family member, you're worried about them, you call for help and it's not coming.
Well, it's almost as though we need another emergency service.
Yes.
Because this is becoming such a big problem.
Yes. That's
you know, like paramedics who are just trained in
trained
that.
in mental health, yeah.
And isn't this also, Nigel, about the allocation of resources? That we speak to police all the time who are frustrated that they have now become a sort of mental health social service, and it means that their resources aren't able to be spent on things like clearing up more than 6% of burglaries.
Yeah, I mean, but I still think that because police are obviously the first on the scene in certain circumstances, say for domestic abuse or something like that, where mental health issues could be playing a part, I think it's a bit sad that the police don't have some mental health training. You know, as first aiders, mental health first aiders, they would be the first there, try and deal with it. I'm not suggesting that they have to become huge experts in the subject, and it should be for the real professionals to take over after that. But I think in the initial stages, the police could help.
But I think Anne's point's a really good one. If we had like a mental health task force that were called out when there's a clear incidence of a public psychosis, the police aren't equipped to train or train to deal with that.
Yeah, but how much money would it take to train up an entirely new sort of emergency service?
Always a problem.
Nigel, there's another trans row happening in a curious sport for the issue, I think, but actually one that is really interesting to debate.
Absolutely. I mean, this is, well, I think this is just weird, but it's the International Chess Federation, and that's the game's international governing body. And what they ruled is that transgender women shouldn't be allowed to compete in matches as women.
So that's biological men can't compete against biological women.
Which is another way of putting it, yes. You could say it that way. No, I understand why you don't allow trans women to compete in cycling. It makes sense that the Olympics are reviewing this when it comes to track and field events, because we're talking about strength and basically different biological bodies. And I can see that in tennis you do the same thing where strength is required. Can't quite see why chess should actually come into this.
Right, so before we go to you, Candice, I think this is the right thing to do, and I know I've been sexist all morning about it. Not sexist, but you know, I think that men's football is better than the women's. In this instance, I also think this is the right decision, because we have to accept if there are physiological differences between men and women, there are. No, men are stronger. Are there cerebral differences? Are typically across a population men's brains more inclined to be at the higher end and the lower end? And therefore, when you look at the pattern of chess grandmasters, they're almost entirely men. There has to be a reason for that. And so it would stand to reason that a biological man with a man's brain playing against a woman could have an advantage.
I don't know how you disaggregate those factors from, say, social and cultural factors. For me, it comes down to how do you define a woman? Is it on the basis of biology, or is it a legally defined term? And for me, it's a biological thing. You are a biological female. I didn't know, as we were discussing earlier, that there were even different categories for men and women in chess. I've never encountered that before. If you watch the brilliant series, The Queen's Gambit on Netflix, or if you read the book, what they explore in that is actually, for a lot of women, they weren't even considered to be as good as men. You were a brilliant woman, but you were in a man's world, and that was a big challenge for female chess players. And probably still is.
It does seem extraordinary to me. I did not know that the chess game had to be segregated. You have women's championship and a men's championship. That therefore obviously states that women and men have different brains to cope with the game of chess. But is that true, do they?
Well, it's a huge scientific row that's been raging for decades. And the fact is, even if we don't know the answer, then surely we should allow women the chance not to be beaten unfairly by.
But Martin, aren't you suggesting that men are better at playing chess than women? In other words, men are more intelligent when it comes to a chessboard.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if you look at the sort of higher functioning autistic Asperger's-y type brains, they typically across entire populations tend to affect men more, and some of those people have an incredible, extraordinary ability to play chess. That's what I'm saying. And typically, more men are in that spectrum. And if you look across the historical realms, there are more male chess grandmasters as a consequence of that. So the debate is, are their brains hardwired different? We don't know the answer. But what I'm saying is, if there is a grey area, they should be segregated and allow women to have a fair chance. That's all I'm saying.
It's fascinating, but as you say, we actually don't know we don't have the evidence to be able to prove or disprove it, but it is interesting. Yeah. We're going to have to leave it there at the moment. Thanks very much indeed. See you again in less than an hour. I've got a wee bit of breaking news for you. Retail figures apparently fell by 1.2% last month. That's according to the ONS, the Office for National Statistics. I can't say it. Statistics. It's believed the unusual wet weather pushed shoppers online instead of us all going out to the shopping centre and lugging shopping around for ourselves. But anyway, there you go. That's just sort of the latest news for you.
That is very believable because, of course, when it's wet, we're just staying. And
who wants to go out?
Hopefully, just a temporary blip. OK.
Now, here's a really interesting one. Is there a cure for alcoholism? An injection into the brain could reduce the amount alcoholics drink by 90%. And that's according to a recent study that's at the moment still being done on monkeys. But apparently the early trials are amazing.
Yeah, it's on rhesus monkeys, and astonishing early trials which use a treatment for Parkinson disease to reset the brain's pleasure pathways have been incredibly effective. The drug could help alcoholics to reduce their drinking and to avoid relapses.
I mean, is this the precious thing that we've all been praying for? Let's speak now to David Bremner, who's medical director at Turning Point. A very good morning to you, David. I mean, this does sound like very good news. Can you explain the science to us a little?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's always great to come and talk about the issues that people with alcohol dependence face. This is a very small study in 8 monkeys, so I think we need to have guarded optimism about this. But what they're hypothesizing is that they are able to modify how a person with a genetic propensity to alcohol dependency actually experiences the pleasure of drinking. And we know that alcoholism and alcohol dependence is very strongly genetically linked. Adoption studies have proven this. So it's of great value to start looking at a treatment system that focuses on that particular area of how people become alcohol dependent. It is in its infancy. It is in monkeys. We are by no way suggesting that people with alcohol dependence are going to have injections in their brains, but any focus on treatments and potential remedies for alcohol dependence is welcomed by the alcohol treatment industry.
So, David, when you understand the addictive cycle of alcohol, there's the huge rush of endorphins the brain gets when it wants something, anything that it's addicted to, and there's also the anxiety of not having it. At which point of that cycle, if you like, or is it just the alcohol coming in and the effect it has on the brain? At which point does this injection kind of interfere with that process?
Well, the hypothesis here is that it interferes with that peak of pleasure that people characteristically feel. I think that when I can remember as a youngster, if I wanted something from a parent, I would, from my dad in particular, I'd wait till he had had his second drink, then I'd ask him. Because my dad was not an alcoholic, I was able to see that alcohol took a while to affect his judgment. However, any of us who've seen old episodes of Dallas, for example, we can see how Sue Ellen, in those experiences, she would experience that peak immediately. And what we see in people who are alcohol dependent is a very different response to that initial sip of alcohol. And this is what that study is hoping to remedy.
A drug. Sorry, David, I don't think you heard me. Is it a particular drug that's being injected?
Well, in this study, it's a particular protein that's been injected into these monkeys' brains as part of their treatment for Parkinsonism. But it's a protein that adjusts the neural pathway that the monkey then uses for that pleasure center. So it's a particular protein that they're injecting.
It's fascinating because previous treatments, of course, have introduced feelings of nausea or make people feel ill when they take alcohol. But this, by directly interfering with the pleasure principle, I assume would make people think, well, what's the point drinking if I'm not getting anything out of it? So therefore, the giving up of alcohol becomes a voluntary process because it ceases to become effective. It seems to have great merit on paper.
It most certainly does. And what we have to realize is, as with all substances of addiction, what one person experiences and what another person experiences are very different. So, one man on the street having a sip of beer has a very different experience and wants more of that substance in a specific way that is very different to how somebody with alcohol dependence, once they have that sip of beer, for example. So this is ideally what we hope that this is going to be able to do, is to have a normal pleasure center response to any alcohol intake.
OK, David Bremner, fascinating stuff. We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us today on Breakfast.
Yeah, and keep up the good work. Gosh, we've got lots more to be talking about, so do stick with us, won't you? Right now, you'll want to know what the weather's doing.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office. It's a windy start to the day, and you'll notice the humidity out there, even if it's not especially sunny. That humidity, along with some instability, courtesy of low pressure to the southwest, leading to the risk of thunderstorms across central and southern parts during the morning this morning. Could cause some impacts with frequent lightning and some intense bursts of rain, but as always, these thunderstorms will be hit and miss, and they do tend to die away as they push northeastwards during the morning. Northern Scotland staying fine, southwest England largely fine as well. Some sunshine coming through, but a lot of cloud and a strong wind, especially for northwest Wales. 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts could impact people on their holidays, for example. Then, well, it gets very lively overnight. A band of heavy rain moves into southwestern areas. That pushes into the rest of England, into Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by midnight. And at the same time, there's the risk of some serious thunderstorms developing across eastern England. Frequent lightning, large hail, intense outbreaks of rain. It's also going to be a windy night and a muggy night. 18, 19 Celsius across some parts of southern UK and mid to high teens widely by dawn across many parts of the country. Heavy persistent rain then moves into parts of Scotland, especially the north and the east. Further spells of rain or showers across Northern Ireland, the rest of Scotland, northern England. A quieter picture for the rest of England and Wales. Sunny spells and showers by and large, and still some warmth in that sun. In the southeast, highs of 25 or 26 degrees.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Friday, the 18th of August already. Today, the government has laid out steps to protect the use of cash after GB News' Don't Kill Cash campaign reached over 300,000 signatures before, as you can see now, it was delivered to number 11 by a team of people from GB News.
And tributes have poured in after former talk show host and legendary journalist Sir Michael Parkinson died at the age of 88. We will look back at his life as a national treasure.
And here's an interesting one. The Lib Dems say there have been 138 sewage leaks across the government department estate. That means in government places within the last 12 months. And the government has lost control. We're going to be joined by a Lib Dem MP a bit later on who's got very strong views on sewage.
And of course, the weekend is on its way. And how will the weather look this time? Well, here's Aidan McGivern from the Met Office with your forecast.
The humidity is rising, low pressure is edging closer. Some very lively weather expected later today. I'll have more in the forecast.
Yes, I think it's going to be quite dodgy weather during the weekend. But a very good morning to you. Welcome to The Breakfast Show. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Still talking about football a lot. Actually, apparently I was wrong to say that the 1966 World Cup was broadcast in colour. It's obviously become a bit of a family legend in my family that my friend's TV was bought, first colour TV in the area, to watch the 66 World Cup. According to Alistair in Wigan, morning Alistair, the 1970 World Cup was the first one in colour.
70 was the year I was born, but I've got the 66 final in colour on DVD.
Yeah, it would have been filmed in colour. Oh, David Mellor's with us.
David Mellor's here.
But because I was walking up and down Swanage Beach doing my deck chair attending, and people were then, they were even using the television, they were just using their radios. But I tell you, people then went to the cinema after the World Cup final because a film was produced showing everything in colour.
Yes.
It was you know, something that just didn't happen.
No, I mean, in black and white TV days, which makes us all sound very old, live, things were still in black and white for a long time, but everything was at the same time filmed in colour. So it came out later in colour. Yeah,
Good.
that's right. That's the way things. That's the way things happened. Well, look, he needs no introduction, really, does he, David Mellor? But basically, we're talking about GB News' Don't Kill Cash campaign because it appears to be yielding results already. Overnight, the Treasury has announced plans to assure access to cash facilities because more than 300,000 people signed our petition to save pound sterling coins and banknotes from apparent extinction and slow our move to a cashless society.
Yesterday, GB News presenters delivered the petition in person to the Treasury at number 11 Downing Street, and within a matter of hours, they said they will require people and businesses to be no more than 3 miles away from a cash withdrawal or deposit centre, and even given the Financial Conduct Authority powers to fine banks who don't comply.
Well, of course, David Mellor, who's with us, was formerly the Chief Secretary to the Treasury and worked behind number 11's front door, did you? Did you actually work in there?
Yes, in the Treasury.
Did you ever receive petitions?
Oh, yes. Telling me to resign? No, I used to receive petitions. But I tell you what, this is long overdue, and I'm glad it's happening, because when you look back at the pandemic, you know the people who did best out of the pandemic? The people who own credit cards. Because suddenly, you know, places where you would never use a credit card, like coffee shops or taxis, suddenly everything was on the credit card. They don't talk about it because they don't want people to know how much they made. But I bet if we knew how much
contactless really came into force as well.
Yeah, and because everyone was worried about getting some bug.
That's right. It was ushered in because of the contact of notes, and it became a sort of new normal. And, of course, that left a lot of people behind, David Lolly, elderly people, disabled people. But I want to talk to you as somebody with grand experience of working in the centre of government. How significant is this that Downing Street has actually reacted this quickly, this swiftly, but can we trust them? Will they see this through? Or are they co-opting a great idea to look popular?
Since I left politics, I no longer think you can trust politicians. When I was in politics, it was a different story. But no, I mean, look, at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who cannot get credit cards. There are a lot of people who do not want to use a credit card. I actually draw out cash and use it for... Ever since my credit card made 3 unauthorised trips to Romania, I actually don't use credit card anymore.
No,
I have.
Exactly. I think a lot of people find credit cards quite frightening because you do hear horrible stories of how they can be, I don't know, duplicated and things like that.
But if this is the government beginning to listen to people, you know, this may not be the world's biggest issue, but it's significant. And certainly if we ended up... Look, I think we're now down to less of these ATMs than we had in the early 2000s, so already a lot have gone. But they shouldn't be allowed to get rid of them, and the banks, you know... I watch these glutinous adverts that the banks put on, and you almost feel in tears about how dedicated they are to the public good. Every opportunity they get to make life difficult for the public, they do.
OK, David, please stay with us. We need to cross now to our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, who's in Birmingham for us and has been finding out what people there on the street think about GB News' Don't Kill Cash campaign. Top of the morning, Jack. What are they saying out there in Birmingham?
Yeah, good morning to you both. Really interesting views from the people that I've been speaking to this morning about the importance of cash, because we don't all use cash in our everyday lives, but we know people that do. We know the times that we do need it and when it is important for us in each of our own lives. And so the Treasury making this move after the Don't Kill Cash campaign to protect the use of cash. In fact, the Unite Union found that since 2015, 6,000 bank branches have closed across the UK, meaning that access to cash is decreasing across the UK. There's not as many places on the high street that you might have been able to access cash as before. So the Treasury moving to protect this, giving the Financial Conduct Authority those powers to fine banks if the banks don't give that access of free withdrawals to cash. But I've been speaking to the people of Birmingham this morning. Here's what they told me.
I think it's really important that we continue using cash in our society. I think we're all sort of like guilty of going in place and using card everywhere we can, and we are starting to lose the actual value of cash, which is going to cause big issues, I think, for society.
Well, yes, I mean, everybody needs it. They should have thought of it a long time ago. That's all I think. It's like most things with this government, too little, far too late.
But it's right that they're protecting cash. I mean, how important is cash to you, for example?
Not very much. but I know people for whom it is.
Yeah, that's the point, isn't it? That not all of us use cash every day, but we all know people that do, particularly those elderly people. And as well with businesses, we've heard over the past few weeks, haven't we, as this Don't Kill Cash campaign has really gained traction, of the businesses, of the people that find this really important. And, you know, that free access to withdrawals is also important as well. Only 78% of cash machines across the UK offer that free withdrawal. That's something the government is trying to crack down onto.
OK, Jack, thanks very much indeed. It's good to hear what people think. We still have David Mellor with us this morning. Can we change tack a little? Because obviously you only have to look at the newspapers. We heard the news yesterday about Sir Michael Parkinson dying. A real loss of a national treasure.
But, you know, a real loss of a man who was far more than just someone who asked glutinous questions to Hollywood celebrities. He made his name writing really tough pieces about what he called the Marylebone Clodpoles Club, which is the MCC and all the rest of it. And I always found him very engaging. Can I tell you one Michael Parkinson story? Right. He lived in a very nice house on the river to the west of London, but he and Mary used to spend a few months every year in Australia, and he got a phone call from his son. Their next-door neighbour was Gerald Ratner. You remember the one who talked about his earrings being crap, and they wouldn't last as long as Marks and Spencer's prawn sandwich. So he said, "Dad, problems here. There was a wind last night, and one of Ratner's trees fell across our house and has done it quite a lot of damage." And then the son said, because Michael was very proud of it, the son said, "You know what, Dad? Even his trees are crap."
He was. I'm so glad you made that point, that he wasn't a chat show host like what you get in the States, where they just welcome in another Hollywood guest and then they just ask them inane questions. Michael Parkinson interviewed people, and that's why when you remember him, you actually remember his interviews. You remember how brilliant he was with Muhammad Ali or whatever, don't you? You don't just remember him. He wasn't the star. He made other people shine like stars, but inadvertently became a star himself.
And before he did his chat shows, you know, just to return to the point, wrote in the Sunday Times, he wrote really tough stuff about the way a lot of our big sports were run. And, you know, he came to television as a really tough-minded journalist and thankfully never lost that.
No. One more question before we have to say thank you and goodbye. Is Sunday morning, with the women's final and our Lionesses doing so well, as important, if not more important, than 1966?
No.
Why not?
Well, you see, I don't want to say, because it's very easy then people just think you're being dismissive. I've enjoyed watching this World Cup. I hope we win it. I'll be there cheering from my sofa, and I hope very much that it'll go well. But no, I mean, the men's World Cup is a far more substantial event. It goes on for much longer, and basically, I think the women have got a long way to go. But when I think that, you know, a lot of... I mean, I noticed this as a Chelsea season ticket holder, you know, people who wouldn't give you tuppence for the women's game are now talking about Chelsea ladies as against the men's team. And, of course, since the men's team aren't very good...
Should Prince William, as head of the FA, be going to Sydney, despite his carbon footprint of having to fly out there? Shouldn't he be there?
Well, particularly since, don't forget, he will one day, if they don't change the rules, as they almost certainly will, he'll be King of Australia as well.
Yeah.
I think he should go, but he obviously isn't going to. But,
well, we don't know for sure.
If the Queen of Spain is there...
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
He ought to go, I think.
We've been told Rishi's not going. Well, all right, he's got other things to do, but Prince William, it's part of his job, isn't it?
Well, I slightly feel so. But, you know, personally, I think Prince William is a charming chap, and I think he's got a lot to contribute. But there have often been whisperings that, you know, he doesn't necessarily put in every hour that God gave to his job. And I think, look, I've never felt more tired out than a trip to Australia and back in a very short time.
Exhausting.
It is, but, you know, he should be there. It's his duty to be there.
Yeah, I agree with that. David Mellor, we're going to have David there. Thanks for joining us this morning on GB News Breakfast. And talking about Rishi having a headache, let's move now to GB News. Is in Downing Street again, but this time for a very different reason. Our political editor, the legendary Christopher Hope, is live at number 10 for us with some exclusive revelations about the Prime Minister's Stop the Boats pledge. Christopher, another headache for Rishi. What can you tell our viewers about it?
That's right. A key focus of Rishi Sunak this year, one of the 5 pledges he made in January, was to stop the boats, the illegal crossings across the Channel. Don't forget, last week we heard how that figure had hit 100,000 in just 5 years. Well, today another milestone could well be passed. It's likely that today or this weekend the number will go above 25,000. That's just since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. The exact figure is 24,860 illegal migrants arrived over the Channel between 25th of October and the 17th of August. That's yesterday. If that goes above that figure, that's another drives home the point that this is not a legacy issue really for the Prime Minister. It's one that's happening right on his watch. 1 in 4 of all crossings since 2017 have happened when he's been behind me in 10 Downing Street. Labour will leap on those figures today. They'll say, what is going on? Why can't the government get a grip? Many of our viewers will think the same thing. That's the problem. And let's wait and see what see number 10 say about that. The Home Office, of course, are saying they're working hard with the French, although there's reports today that the numbers of of crossings stopped on the beaches of France have declined. That's on the front page of today's Telegraph. That's a worry, because we've given them lots of money to try and stop the crossings. So, yes, it's difficult for Sunak. Yes, during the football, the flags are out behind me on Downing Street, but the reality of this policy and why it's got to succeed for Sunak has not gone away.
I mean, as you said, it's front-page news already on the Daily Telegraph. We're sort of asking, where's all our money going if the French are actually getting rid of fewer migrants than they did last year? Your figures show the same. This issue is not going to go away. Was he really unwise to make it a pledge that we can now see he's obviously failed in?
Well, he hasn't failed yet. He hasn't failed yet, Anne, because he hasn't said when he'll do it by. He said he'll stop the boats, but it's not time limited. The problem they've got is I don't expect this ruling by the courts on whether the Rwanda plan, that's to fly out migrants who arrived here illegally to Rwanda and process applications there. That idea, which is meant to break the model of the people smugglers, won't be looked at by the courts or decided by the courts until December. So I think we're going to be facing a very difficult autumn on the small boats crossings. They will decline as the weather gets worse and more inclement. But while it's hot and sunny, although it might not be this weekend, but while we're in the summer, these numbers will get worse. It shows a direction of travel. But what the people who tell me that they back the Tories and Sunak, they want to see a vision, an idea of hope away from these 5 challenges which are proving difficult.
But back to Anne's point, though, Chopper, the problem is stop the boats is binary. It means stopping them. It doesn't mean slightly reducing them. It doesn't mean 4% down. It doesn't mean, oh, the weather was better last week, therefore it's gone up. It's like stopping is stopping. I think it is a foolhardy thing to say, unless there's a severe change of tack going towards an Australian-style, very, very strict border control. Do you think any kind of appetite is there for that kind of policy within the Conservative Party, Chopper?
Well, there should be, given by the polls. The issue of small boats crossings regularly goes very high up in what is concerning voters, and they get that. Stop the boats is, as you say, and Martin, it's a binary choice they're trying to make there. They're not saying when it's going to happen. What they'll want to do, I think, is try to change the subject in the next few months into a kind of idea of what will happen if they win the next election, because they're not going to, I mean, if they can stop all the boats, every single boat crossing, by this time next year, it'll be extraordinary. But judging by the past record, that looks less likely.
OK, Christopher Hope, thank you for that exclusive new line live from Downing Street. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Meanwhile, to news that we learned yesterday and today, this morning, tributes are still pouring in for Sir Michael Parkinson, one of Britain's most celebrated broadcasters. I can barely believe I'm reading it out, sadly. He died yesterday at the age of 88.
Yeah, it's been sort of choking you all morning, hasn't it? Let's face it, you knew the man, the legend, very well.
Yeah, but you know how it affects you. You live in a world where he's always around, and then suddenly he's not. You can't actually believe it.
Yeah. because in a career spanning 7 decades on television, Sir Michael, of course, fondly known as Parky by friends and fans, and of course I think all of the British public, became one of the greatest interviewers of all time with his long-running chat show.
Well, Stephanie Tecci is with us this morning, and we have a lovely picture of you actually with him shortly after you interviewed him. What was the occasion?
So he was promoting his book that he'd wrote about him and Muhammad Ali's relationship, because they had known each other for so long. He had interviewed him about 4 times. So he was talking about their interactions, both on screen, off screen. And what I found about Sir Michael Parkinson, he was just very warm and authentic, and he was really passionate, as me as a young journalist coming up, just being to have that kind of authority and that credibility.
I bet he was as interested in hearing about your job.
He was, actually.
As you wanted it.
And to be honest, he was quite impressed with my set of questions that I asked him. So I always feel I had a bit of a pinch me moment. It was bigger than meeting any celebrity. It was Sir Michael Parkinson, because he set the precedent for people who really want to get into doing good interviews and want to be good broadcasters and good journalists. And what I've seen from all tributes, that one word that keeps on coming up is authentic.
Yes.
Both on and off screen.
One of the few people who really deserve that.
Yeah, we spoke to John Stapleton yesterday, obviously a former colleague of his, and I said, you know, sum him up in a word. He said empathetic.
Yeah.
Just like that. And it wasn't, you know, he didn't say legend or anything lazy. Empathetic, a listener, somebody who cared about those who were in front of him.
Yes.
And that conversational style was so engaging for the audience.
Yeah, well, that's what worked, isn't it? Should we talk about that to Lord Michael Grade, who joins us now, former BBC and ITV chairman. And it's lovely to see you, Michael. Hi. Hello. Tell us about your experiences. When did you first meet Michael Parkinson, and what do you think of him?
Well, he's a legend, but I was a boy agent in short trousers in the late 60s, and always on the lookout to sign up new talent. I saw him do a few things for Granada Television and a bit for sport for London Weekend. I thought, this guy's got something, so I took him out for a very expensive lunch, told him that I was the manager of his dreams and that he should sign with me for the rest of his life. We had a great lunch. I never heard from him again till years later. But I think he dodged a bullet. But I was a huge fan before he was famous.
And then, how would you, when we are all looking back over his remarkable career and what he was like as a man, how would you sum him up?
Well, what you saw is what you got. What you saw on the show was very natural. He wasn't a personality. He wasn't a presenter. He was a highly trained journalist and very, very skilled. He could write beautifully. But he was always interested in interviewing his heroes. And you see his face light up when he meets Jimmy Cagney or Jimmy Stewart or any of the greats, Jacob Bronowski, you name it, Muhammad Ali, obviously. But he was interested in what they had to say. He learned as a journalist, you don't get a story by talking yourself. You ask short questions and try and encourage the other one to entertain and inform. He was a master of conversation. I won't call it chat. That's demeaning, I think. It's conversation.
And how important do you think it was that he had that journalistic pedigree, starting on the Barnsley Chronicle, then onto the Manchester Guardian, the Observer, the Sunday Times, spoke to a heck of a lot of ordinary people, getting their stories out of them. He had that everyman touch, son of a coal miner. He wasn't what we were used to on British television, was he? He was a breath of fresh air.
Good Barnsley accent on the BBC at that time was quite a novelty, excuse me. But that journalism ran right through him, and without that, he would never have been the success that he was.
Richard Littlejohn writes about him beautifully in the Mail today, saying that there was at one point where he sort of said something I think was meant to be quite cutting about Parky was back on telly, but he was interviewing people from many years ago, and he snapped back, "You meet a better class of person down memory lane." He did do
Lovely.
He did these legendary figures, and they were obviously so fond of him that they came back again and again.
They trusted him. They absolutely trusted him not to, he wasn't looking for headlines, cheap. These days they'd be looking for cheap social media sound bites, which I know you guys would never do. But the modern world of celebrity was not for him. His world was his heroes, but his heroes were our heroes, the audience's heroes. And we couldn't believe on a Saturday, my God, is Al Parky talking to Jimmy Stewart? It was just breathtaking.
Yes, he spoke as the common man. I suppose he interviewed and conversed, as you say, as the common man in our place.
Well, if you're a good journalist, you know the questions that are on the audience's mind, and you know the supplementary questions that will lead you into a good story or a good anecdote or a bit of nice revelation. But he was never looking for sensation. He was interested in giving the biggest stars in the world the opportunity to strut their stuff for a British audience in a very relaxed, uncontrolled way, uncontrolled by minders, by PR people, studio marketing department. Let's have a, come on, Jimmy Stewart, let's have a chat. Wonderful, magical, dream world.
Everybody's saying we'll never see his like again. Sadly, do you think that's true?
Yeah, I mean, the art of conversation's dead, isn't it? It's all sound bites. Celebrities who come and go after 3 minutes and a splash on the front page of the Star, and it's all over. Nobody's interested in that long term, but people have very short attention spans today, and hopefully somebody will come along who can have some intelligent and entertaining conversations on television again. I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime.
Oh, well, it's great to talk to you, though. It's lovely to see you again.
Lovely to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And God bless Parky and his family.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you very much for saying that. That's a little soundbite we might use. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Wasn't it? And it absolutely nailed it, you know, the way that we were invited into that conversation, because Parky could almost mind read what we wanted to ask the celebrity.
Well, that is, as Lord Grade said, that's the journalist's job, isn't it, Stephanie?
It is, and it's just that treasure of conversation which we don't have anymore due to social media, people living through their screens. So that's what you treasure about that era, and especially what Sir Michael Parkinson did, respecting the conversation.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, it's a great way to pay tribute to him. So there we are. I think at 8:23 it's about time we caught up with what's happening with the weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office. It's a windy start to the day, and you'll notice the humidity out there, even if it's not especially sunny. That humidity, along with some instability, courtesy of low pressure to the southwest, leading to the risk of thunderstorms across central and southern parts during the morning this morning. Could cause some impacts with frequent lightning and some intense bursts of rain, but as always, these thunderstorms will be hit and miss, and they do tend to die away as they push northeastwards during the morning. Northern Scotland staying fine, southwest England largely fine as well. Some sunshine coming through, but a lot of cloud and a strong wind, especially for northwest Wales. 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts could impact people on their holidays, for example. Then, well, it gets very lively overnight. A band of heavy rain moves into southwestern areas. That pushes into the rest of England, into Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by midnight. And at the same time, there's the risk of some serious thunderstorms developing across eastern England. Frequent lightning, large hail, intense outbreaks of rain. It's also going to be a windy night and a muggy night. 18, 19 Celsius across some parts of southern UK and mid to high teens widely by dawn across many parts of the country. Heavy persistent rain then moves into parts of Scotland, especially the north and the east. Further spells of rain or showers across Northern Ireland, the rest of Scotland, northern England. A quieter picture for the rest of England and Wales. Sunny spells and showers by and large, and still some warmth in that sun. In the southeast, highs of 25 or 26 degrees.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I can't believe I'm saying this, but we're still talking football. Tony says, I'm sorry, but for me, the World Cup final on Sunday is much more than 1966. Having totally gone off men's football over the years, with no interest in the Premier League Championship, the amount the players are paid in a time when everyone is struggling and working hard.
Yeah, and Ben is giving me a slap on the wrist. Ben in London, and you're absolutely correct. The men in the studio not giving the England football team, the Lionesses, the credit they deserve. What they have done is to show the men of today what the women of today can do, and they are doing it better than the men. Ben, stand corrected.
Keep your views coming in, though, don't you? Will you, please? GB Views at gbnews.com. Meanwhile, there's plenty more to come, including an interview with Labour's Education Minister, Stephanie Morgan. This is Breakfast on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening. from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle. I know, yeah. Please stop. Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, the big green, my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 8:30. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin.
Let's speak now to Stephen Morgan, who is the Shadow Schools Minister. And a very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us. GB News here has been running a campaign called Don't Kill Cash, which we presented 300,000 signatures on a petition yesterday to number 11. And it would appear that they have responded. I just wonder what your thoughts are on the whole business of our society sort of losing cash.
Well, thank you for running the petition, because I know it's the poorest in society that don't always get access to cash, and certainly in Portsmouth, where I represent, people have really struggled when banks have closed and cash machines have charged people. So I think it's a really important campaign, and I'm really pleased the government have listened.
Stephen, the A-level results were out yesterday, of course. That's something that you'll be all over. There's talk about grades being deflated, previous overinflation. But I know one thing you're keen to talk about is the disproportionate representation of communities in the working classes, the attainment gap. What do you have planned for that in the Labour Party?
Well, the first thing to say is thank you and well done to all students that got their results yesterday, and thank you to teachers and school and college support staff across the country that have worked tirelessly to support young people across the country. But what we saw yesterday were unequal results across the country. Almost 40% or more, 40% more likely to get the top grades in London and the South East than you are in the North East. And I think this is because the government have said that they maxed out on support for young people post-pandemic. The tutoring programme has failed and there have been real consequences for children up and down the country. Labour's plan is ambition for every young person. We want to make sure there's good pathways to good progress for every young person, and that means by putting more teachers and retaining teachers in the classroom to make sure that every young person succeeds.
But Stephen, isn't the biggest damage that we cause to an entire generation through education lockdowns and closing schools? And that was something that Keir Starmer wanted sooner, harder and longer, even than the Conservatives.
Well, we obviously wanted to keep schools open, and many schools did for key workers. That's now in the past. What the government could have done is invest in a recovery plan that would have supported the tackling of lost learning. The government failed, and what we saw as the result was the education czar that the government appointed resigned because the fact the government weren't putting enough money into this, and the consequences are now being felt up and down the country with not a levelling playing field that I would want to see.
It's interesting. I mean, you said at the beginning you congratulate all the youngsters who did well yesterday, and there will be some youngsters who feel that their A-level grades weren't good enough. Can I ask you, are A-level results that important, really? Because when you grow up into the adult world, nobody ever asks you for your A-level results, do they? I mean, do we actually put too much emphasis on these exams and not enough emphasis on maybe other ways into work?
Well, obviously that's what Gillian Keegan said yesterday. I mean, shocking that the Education Secretary said that. Of course, results matter. I was the first in my family to go to university, and I really focused hard on my A-levels. I want to make sure that every young person can go on to succeed in life by having good pathways to get those good prospects for life. And of course, results matter, exams matter. We want to make sure that every young person succeeds, and Labour's got a plan to deliver that.
Great. Stephen Morgan, Shadow Schools Minister, thank you for joining us this morning on GB News Breakfast. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I wonder, though, if you're watching it from home, what you feel about that, and whether or not it wasn't such a bad thing to say that A-level results don't matter that much. There are as long as there were other ways into work that you could say to somebody who was disappointed with their A-level results, maybe can't get into university after all, you could say, all right, but you could go and do a terrific, what do you call it?
Apprenticeship?
Thank you.
Yeah,
for in the city, for a big bank, for whoever. There are lots of ways into really good, profitable work that aren't necessarily university.
Yeah, and Stephen Morgan's party, the Labour Party in particular, Tony Blair said education, and I think we forced a lot of people down a route that perhaps wasn't best for them and was very expensive for them.
And has left them with a big debt, and maybe that not the right job after all of that too.
A big debt and perhaps over-expectation of where they can get and achieve in life, whereas what we should be doing is getting more people into
My sons have moaned consistently that not only did they need a degree to try and get into the profession they wanted, they then needed a master's as well.
Which is ridiculous.
It's just too much and not necessarily the right way in. I never went to university. Used to be a chip on my shoulder. I think it's a bit of a relief now.
But look where you are and what you've achieved in your life, you're living.
Been able to.
You don't need to go.
Michael Parkinson left school with 2 O-levels and look how well he did.
There you go.
I'm sorry, it's not the only thing, getting A-level results.
Well said.
Anyway, we've got lots more to talk about because we'll be looking through this morning's newspapers in just a couple of moments. You're watching Breakfast.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's 8:39. Welcome back. You're watching and listening. I like to be prompt, yeah. Listening to A Breakfast with Anne and Martin.
It's time to go through the papers now. My favourite part of the show. Joining us this morning, of course, are GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth. Been with us already through the morning. Nigel, the games are over. Fascinating story, this one, about the physical effect of screen time on young children.
Yes, and I think it's the saddest story of the day, actually, because it means that kids are abandoning traditional games. So a quarter have never played Conkers. Camping under the stars, 1 in 3 have never done that. 4 in 10 have never built a tree house, gone fishing, made a bow and arrow, or swum in a lake. And it seems that all this sort of outdoor pursuits that you'd hope that they would do just seems to have gone by the board. And the saddest of the lot is that only 1 in 5 kids have ever played poo sticks.
Oh, yes, it's a sort of rite.
That's right, it's a rite of passage, yes.
I'm delighted to say I've done all of those things with my kids.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'm a very hands-on sort of, dad, teaching kids DIY skills, getting them out and about.
But I tell you what, the problem, my kids were always able to do those sort of things because we had a field next to our house.
Yeah.
And they used to just go and, get lost in the field for a half an hour or whatever and do all sorts of things. And I think the problem is it's not just screen time. Not enough kids live near open green spaces.
Some of that, yeah.
With sort of safe monitoring.
That's the thing, the fear. But the interesting thing about this, the science in this story, is it's actually making kids myopic. It's affecting their short vision.
The survey was done by a group that of the Myopic Awareness Coalition, and they say yes, that's right. Yeah. Kids are now becoming short-sighted because they're not going outside. They're spending all their time on screens.
Well, don't we all feel that? I mean, if I've spent a day that I'm really writing something on that laptop, you look up and your eyes can't focus for a while.
Yeah.
It's a real It's horrible, actually. So, and I'm not spending nearly as much time on my computer as some kids do on their small screens.
Exactly right, and that's the way it's going. So get your kids out there to summer holidays, get them into a field, do something outdoorsy if you're able to do so. Candice, fascinating story, front page of the Financial Times today. Jonathan Van Tam, that man, Van Tam, thank you, ma'am, the one who was saying during all of those press conferences to take the jab, has now been made a senior role at where?
At Moderna. So he's been criticised for this by various civil rights groups who say that there's a revolving door. So people work in politics and then they move into companies where they're then able to lobby the government again. I mean, there's absolutely no suggestion that he's done anything untoward. The Parliamentary Standards Committee say he can't lobby until 2024. But I guess the obvious criticism here is when he was in government, did he have his eye on working for one of these companies? And that can be a problem. You know, you had the same with David Cameron when he was criticised for lobbying on behalf of Greensill, that company. It's tricky because all these businesses work on relationships, right? So, I mean, you know, if you're working for Moderna, you need to have good relationships with the government. So you need people in there who know what's going on and can get in front of the right people. But are there conflicts of interest? And I think that is a really legitimate question to ask.
I think what's really interesting about this, I mean, you're absolutely right, this happens a lot, the revolving door. Savi Javi, was it JP Morgan? He ended up on their advisory board. So it does happen a lot. But I guess what's interesting about this, particularly because it is about the vaccine, normally a lot of the press would be jumping on this story, but they don't seem to be doing that about this one.
It's always these tricky stories, right? I mean, stuff like vaccines, people don't want to go near it. They're very afraid of it. But I think that it is legitimate to question conflicts of interest. Absolutely. You know, you're not saying anything conspiratorial there. That's simply about ethics and interests.
Yes.
Tell us about psycho seagulls again, Nigel.
Yeah, this is a great story, this. Some experts have been putting GPS tags on seagulls to check their behaviour, and it turns out they're even brighter than we thought they were.
So that's dangerous.
Apparently, when they come to nick our food on the beach, they act rather like shoplifters in pairs. So one comes towards you to distract you. You think that's the one who's going to be after your chips or your ice cream. One comes up behind and actually nicks it. And so it looks as if that the seagulls have worked the whole game out, work in pairs. I don't know how they divvy the food up afterwards, but
that reminds you of in Jurassic Park about the velociraptors who did the same thing, isn't it? Yeah. And when you think of it, birds are dinosaurs, aren't they?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
That's worrying.
I can well believe this. We did seagull attacks once before on breakfast, and people went mad all morning, sending in their stories about how they'd lost their chip butty, their cod subreddit exploded as this furry monster flew in, and they're getting bolder. They're bold as brass. They're getting bigger.
Yeah, and now they're getting brainier. It's not on, is it? It really isn't. Right, talking about brains, in the FT, Candice, you've been looking at the battle for the election.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting story. So Labour is apparently planning to water down some of its workers' rights pledges. So this is in terms of parental leave, dismissals, and what they were going to do is they were going to really try and tackle what they believe are unfair practices in the gig economy. They were going to create a whole category of worker, which would exclude the self-employed, and then they would get access to all these things, paid leave, parental leave, etc. But now apparently they're rowing back on it a little bit before the election, which of course has angered the unions like Unite and Momentum are very much on the left and don't like this. I think the big question to ask is, what are Labour standing for now? They seem to be rowing back on so much for the election. What are they for? What are they for?
It's interesting, Nigel, because this also follows on the heels of the child benefits cap, which they did a U-turn on. A lot of kind of core Labour Party members saying you're basically the Tories in disguise, or is this an admission of the fact they've just got no money because we're broke, we're 2.6 trillion in debt?
Yeah, I think it's the money side of it. That what Labour will do is roughly what Tony Blair did back in 1997 and adopt Tory spending policies for the first couple of years, which probably is the responsible thing to do. But it means all the things they wanted to do which cost money, they can't.
But there was more money around when Tony Blair
There was, yes.
came into power.
Yes, there was.
At the moment it was, I wonder if any next government will have that same note left for them saying, you know, good luck, there's no money in the kitty.
Yes, and that was meant to be a joke that the Tories keep using to actually batter Labour with.
But that note that was at Liam Byrne.
Liam Byrne,
Was it? Yes, that's right.
The country then was a mere 800 million in debt. We're now 2.6 trillion in debt.
Amazing.
So you're absolutely right, Anne. You know, Blair came in with bold pledges and promises, but you had quite a bulging bank account. Whereas now, maybe the Labour Party are just having to get real.
But why do they keep having to look backwards? It just seems like Keir Starmer doesn't know which way to go forward.
No, it is as though they're testing the water all the time to see what their policies should be. Whereas in the olden days, you know, 20, 30, 40 years ago, if you voted Labour because you knew inherently what they were for, and also the same with the Tories. Now, you're not terribly sure what you're voting for.
It is the costing thing that, I mean, Rachel Reeves is acting rather like Gordon Brown did with Tony Blair when Gordon Brown was Chancellor. They really keep a very sort of, you know, a tight rein on the money and make sure there is the money there to carry out what they say they're going to carry out. So Blair's pledge card wasn't, if you remember that back to 97, the 5 things he promised to do and did in the first term, they weren't that ambitious.
Shortened waiting lists was one of them, wasn't it?
100,000 off waiting lists was one of them, 250,000 young people off benefited into work, fast-track punishment for young offenders, and one of the class sizes of under 30 for 5 and 7s, and the big one, a strong economy, and he got debt down to 40%, now it's 100%.
Nigel, your memory
is brilliant.
I was feeling for you, you're going to forget halfway through. Well done.
Well, we're going to say love you and leave you right now. Thank you so much, both of you, for being in this morning. It's been fascinating. But we're going to be talking about something that I know affects everybody who maybe is choosing to do a staycation this year. You think, all right, my family, if the weather's any good, we'll be on the beach and we'll be able to enjoy a swim. Well, maybe not where you live, or where you go on holiday, because the sea could be full of, you don't want me to say. Well, this is an interesting one, because parliamentary questions tabled by the Lib Dems have revealed that civil servants in Whitehall and across the country suffer the same sewage misery as seaside swimmers. Let's speak now to Liberal Democrat MP Christine Jardine. Lovely to see you again, Christine. Thanks so much for joining us. It's an odd one to be talking to you about this morning, sewage.
Yeah, too often we're having to talk about this problem. Too little's been done to solve it, and there are too many examples of it happening all over the country.
How did you come up? How did you, Lib Dems? I'm not sure it was whether you personally. How did you come up with this issue of looking at sewage problems actually within Whitehall?
Well, we listen to what people tell us is happening. We listen to our constituents, first of all, and we listen to people across the country, and then we listen to what was actually happening in Whitehall and knew that there was a problem, and asked the question, and we're horrified at the answer. There's been more than 100 examples of sewage leaks in government buildings. There's also an example in one of the newspapers today of a building being closed because of an insect infestation. Now, this is just not acceptable. Nobody should be asked to work in these conditions. It shouldn't be any different from civil servants, from anybody else in the country. And they shouldn't be asked to work in conditions which are unhealthy, insanitary, or where buildings have to be closed down. And we're just seeing too much of this, and the government letting the water companies away with it when, you know, CEOs have been paid huge bonuses and families are frightened to let the children swim in the sea.
Even your dog agrees.
I'm glad to see you have the same problem as the rest of us. When you're trying to do interviews from home, it's very difficult when you've got a dog or an Amazon delivery. Indeed. I always find.
Yeah. Now, Christine.
Even when they're on a.
Christine, a cynic might say, well, you know, what a surprise. There's loads of effluent in politics, loads of effluent in Westminster. But specifically, what's happening? Is this blocked drains? I mean, what kind of things are happening on government premises?
Well, it's a variety of things which are leading to these leaks. And it's not acceptable that it's happening anywhere. And it's another sort of indication of the fact that the government is another problem they're not getting to grips with. Nothing's been done to, clamp down on the fact that, as I said, the water companies are making profits, they are paying vast bonuses, and yet Families are afraid to go swimming in the sea, as I said, this summer. The first summer where they've been completely free to feel that they could go on holiday. And we've had quite good weather some of the time, and not able to make the most of it. And that's unacceptable. And now to see that people are also getting it in their workplace, we're not safe, that's simply not good enough. And the government needs to get to grips with this.
Yeah, and the government's blaming excessive rainfall. I mean, they blame excessive leaves, they blame excessive snow, they blame anything but themselves. But excessive rainfall is basically causing the system to overflow. It's breakfast. I won't go into too much detail. But on the broader point of effluent in the sea, which is something much more concerning to people, especially during holiday season. My kids are about to go to Pembrokeshire. They'll be straight in the sea there. Who's to blame for all of this? Is it the government or is it the water companies? Is it a bit of both? And what could be done about it?
It's a bit of both. The water companies really need to be operating in this. And the government seems to hide behind the fact that it's Victorian engineering. But investment wasn't made at the right time. We've now got a massive problem. And the government needs to ensure that the money that we all pay to the water companies is directed towards the repairs. It's directed towards doing something about it. It's not good enough to say that we're monitoring it, we know how bad it is. The reason for monitoring it should be to fix it. And the government needs to ensure that the money is directed towards doing that. And that, profits take second place to ensuring that people, families, children, pets are safe in our waters and our rivers. I mean, some of our clean beaches that had Clean Beach Awards, and now you wouldn't want to paddle in them, never mind swim.
OK, Christine, on a change of tack now, you may have seen GB News yesterday delivered our petition of 300,000 signatures to 11 Downing Street, our campaign of Don't Kill Cash. Can you give me a picture of how important cash still is to people in Scotland and in your constituency in Edinburgh West? Cash still has a place in people's lives, doesn't it?
Oh, massive place. A lot of us during COVID got used to not carrying cash, and now we're finding that we go into places and say, well, why have you not got cash? And it's massively important to a lot of small traders, taxi drivers. Pensioners are finding it increasingly difficult. They want cash, and where are they going to get it? In my constituency, there's one bank where if you live at one end of it in one of the communities, South Queensferry, if you're a customer of that bank, you will have to travel into the centre of the city. That's about 7 or 8 miles to get a machine where you can get money from to get a bank branch that's your bank branch. And people do still like to have money, to have the security of knowing that they've got it there. If for some reason, with a lot of these electronic means of paying nowadays, the Wi-Fi can fail. They can be out of range. You need the cash. And for the government to have taken so long actually to realise that this is a problem kind of has me stumped, because I remember not long after I was first elected in 2017, the Royal Bank of Scotland was talking about closing down branches, and then other banks started talking about it. We're drawing this to the government's attention and saying, look, you're going to get into the situation where people will not have access to cash. And it's taken this long to actually realise and talk about doing something about it.
Superb.
Brilliant. Okay. Great to talk to you. Always is. Christine Jardine, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Very much for joining us.
Okay, please stay with us. Don't go anywhere. This is GB News Breakfast.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office. It's a windy start to the day, and you'll notice the humidity out there, even if it's not especially sunny. That humidity, along with some instability, courtesy of low pressure to the southwest, leading to the risk of thunderstorms across central and southern parts during the morning this morning. Could cause some impacts with frequent lightning and some intense bursts of rain, but as always, these thunderstorms will be hit and miss, and they do tend to die away as they push northeastwards during the morning. Northern Scotland staying fine, southwest England largely fine as well. Some sunshine coming through, but a lot of cloud and a strong wind, especially for northwest Wales. 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts could impact people on their holidays, for example. Then Well, it gets very lively overnight. A band of heavy rain moves into southwestern areas. That pushes into the rest of England, into Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by midnight. And at the same time, there's the risk of some serious thunderstorms developing across eastern England. Frequent lightning, large hail, intense outbreaks of rain. It's also going to be a windy night and a muggy night. 18, 19 Celsius across some parts of southern UK and mid to high teens widely by dawn across many parts of the country. Heavy persistent rain then moves into parts of Scotland, especially the north and the east. Further spells of rain or showers across Northern Ireland, the rest of Scotland, northern England. A quieter picture for the rest of England and Wales. Sunny spells and showers by and large, and still some warmth in that sun. In the southeast, highs of 25 or 26 degrees.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
you should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media. Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hello, good morning. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, the 18th of August. Today, the government has laid out steps to protect the use of cash across the country after GB News' Don't Kill Cash campaign reached over 300,000 signatures before being delivered to number 11.
And tributes have poured in after former talk show host and legendary journalist Sir Michael Parkinson died at the age of 88. We look back at the life of a national treasure.
And GB News can reveal there have been over 25,000 migrant crossings alone since Rishi Sunak entered number 10. Our new political editor, Christopher Hope, will be joining us shortly with more on that.
And the weekend is on the way. How will the weather look this time? Well, here's Aidan McGivern from the Met Office with more.
The humidity is rising, low pressure is edging closer. Some very lively weather expected later today. I'll have more in the forecast.
Well, anyway, you've got a warm and welcome good morning from us. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Have you ever been asked for your O or A level results at all in adult life? Dave says, when I was at a grammar school in the 50s and 60s, only 2 pupils got the equivalent of A star, and their names were written on the school honours board.
Yeah, and Paul in Northumberland is saying, I left school at 16 with 5 GCSEs, got a job almost immediately and started paying into a pension scheme at 17 with a target of retiring at 50.
Wow.
By the time my future wife left further education at 23 and took her first job, I'd been in work for 6 years, was building up a nice pension, I bought a car and my first house, and I did retire at 50, and at that time my wife still wasn't earning as much as I was. Paul, hurrah, well done, mate.
Yeah, it just shows. Gareth in Bridgend says, I'm 71, I went to a grammar school, I've never been asked for O or A level results or even certificates. I still have them though, just in case. 71.
And on the thorny and divisive topic of the women's football, Lionesses on Sunday, Fiona says, I'm with Martin on the football. Women's football has still got a long way to catch up with the men.
You just had to say that, didn't you?
Yes, I did, sorry.
OK. To our top story this morning, GB News' Don't Kill Cash campaign apparently already yielding results. Overnight, the Treasury has announced plans to assure access to cash facilities. More than 300,000 lovely people signed the petition to save pound sterling coins and banknotes from extinction and slow what is obviously going to be a move in the end to a cashless society.
Yeah, yesterday, GB News presenters delivered the petition in person to the Treasury at number 11 Downing Street, and within a matter of hours, they said that they will require people and businesses to be no more than 3 miles away from a cash withdrawal or deposit centre, and they will even give the Financial Conduct Authority powers to fine banks who don't comply.
So all looking good so far. Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis is in Nottingham for us this morning. Will, what are people saying up there?
Well, the turnaround was quite quick, wasn't it? Less than 24 hours, and there was some sort of a response from the government. We've been talking about it for months now. Don't kill cash, and the people that are affected by a cashless society or a move towards a cashless society. One of the people here in Nottingham that works with cash and cash alone is Annette. You've got the High Street Flower Barrow here in Nottingham City Centre. You've actually got a sign that says cash only. Just describe for me, why do you want to have a cash only business?
Because I find that cash is king, cards are control, and also with me going cash only, I can be very competitive, which is needed out on the streets because the town centre is littered with supermarkets that also sell flowers, so I need to be competitive because people use cards in supermarkets as opposed to cash, because they don't like to carry cash around for safety reasons and maybe because they don't have the cash. So therefore, with me being cash only, I can sell 10 stems in my bouquets for £5, whereas if you go to a supermarket, you probably get 5 stems for £10. So that's the difference. If they want to have cash only, then they get competitive prices.
So you'd be paying more if you took card payments?
If I took card payments, yes, of course. I would.
You'd be paying more for wholesale?
Yes. I would be paying more wholesale, but I would also be paying bank charges, and that's the difference.
What do your customers think about it? Do you ever get people saying cash only, oh, no, I'm not fussed about that, I'll go somewhere else?
Probably 1 out of 10, but if they want my flowers, then they obviously go and find the cash. I have 3 banks, 1 on each corner, so therefore it's never really a problem. They all see my cash only sign, they soon come back when they see what they're getting for £5.
And the news today is that the government is going to be putting in some protections so that within 3 miles of big population centres there are cash machines. I think that would be really good for people like you. Annette, thank you so much for speaking to us this morning here on GB News. Of course, we're going to be speaking to people throughout Nottingham and the country today to see how cash plays a role in their businesses and their day-to-day lives.
Well, thank you, Wu Hollis from Nottingham. That's the Market Square there. Just round the corner, there's a statue of Brian Clough. There's a bloke who likes a bit of cash in his pocket. And we've got another one in the studio here, our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. You were there yesterday, thundering on the door with Nigel Farage, Bev Turner, Patrick Christys, Michelle Dewberry. What was the mood like on the ground there? And most importantly, this has had a really quick impact. Overnight, GB News leading the way.
I think that's subjectively fair, what you just said. Maybe not the thundering on the door, like polite tap.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask. Do you have to ring them first and say, we're coming down to deliver a petition?
Well, they knew we were, because we'd been talking about it on social media. So how good would they look if we go there and no one answers?
Well, I know. Wouldn't that be embarrassing?
Civil servants.
Exactly.
So, look, why are we doing this campaign? We're doing this campaign because while many of us will be thinking, but I just want to pay contactless, it's inevitable. There are almost 2 million people, Martin, in this country, 2 million households where no one has a bank account because they can't get a bank account. There are 10% of households in the UK, almost 3 million, that don't have regular access to the internet. They cannot shop online easily. They cannot become part of this cashless society. Many of these people are elderly, but many of them aren't. Many of them are just struggling and vulnerable and decent people. So what we wanted to do as we move away from cash, given the huge vested interests who want that to happen, the big banks who don't want to handle the cash, the big retailers who don't want to handle the cash, the tech giants who want to monitor everything that we shop for online so then they can sell that pattern of behaviour to other marketing companies who can then try and flog us things that we can't afford. We at GB News feel that we've got to stick up for people who want to keep cash. And guess what? When we launched this campaign, there were certain regulatory eyebrows cast in the direction of this channel. There was much sneering from a London-centric media class. Oh, who cares about cash? These people just don't understand ordinary life in the UK. And let's have a look now. Let's just take one moment. This young news channel, what the Treasury has said about us this morning. Let's have a look at this graphic. This is from Andrew Griffiths, who's Economic Secretary to the Treasury, who I can tell you is probably the most financially literate person in government. He's had a distinguished business career. GB News has it spot on, says Andrew Griffiths, Economic Secretary to the Treasury. Access to cash is incredibly important to many. It's a choice that we are going to protect. People shouldn't have to trek for hours to withdraw a tenner to put in someone's birthday card. Nor should businesses have to travel large distances to deposit cash takings. That's why we, the government, are acting now to protect access to cash in law and laying out that this means fee-free withdrawals and the availability of cash facilities within a reasonable distance. I live in a prosperous market town. I'm lucky enough to have done pretty well in life. My town has the first ever Barclays Bank. It's just closed. This is a prosperous market town in the southeast of England. I talk to farmers, local people. That's when you live outside the M25, you tend to mix a lot more with people from across society. And small businesses are tearing their hair out. The difficulties they have of depositing cash. Market traders are tearing their hair out. Why? Because they use these machines, these card payment machines. Once cash has gone, how much are the card payment companies going to charge them? 5, 6, 7, 10%?
Well, they can charge what they want once they've got you.
Well, they can charge what they want, Anne, and this is the thing. There are FCA regulations about what these card companies should charge, but they flout the law because they know to come after them is so much hassle. What are you going to do? Retrospectively get them to refund small sections of billions of previous transactions.
It's interesting you say that about the banks closing down. I live in a small village, which actually has quite a lot of people in it who would like a bank. We had a bank. It closed down about 3 years ago. It is now 2 houses. What was the bank? So we've lost a real important facility.
So the bank sold that prime real estate and flogged it to a developer who then flogged it to people who wanted to buy houses there. Look, if you have a banking licence, it is basically a licence to print money, right? It is literally a licence to create money. If you have that licence, you should have a universal service obligation. You have to provide banking facilities within geographic areas. The government has now recognised, after huge behind-the-scenes advocacy, by the way, and you should also have a universal obligation to provide households, however vulnerable, however unattractive commercially, with basic banking facilities.
OK, Liam, quick impact, big win for GB News, but is the work just beginning? We've got to make sure we hold these people to account and keep pushing on this petition.
Absolutely, and let's get the petition up to 400, 500,000. Let's get it up to 1 million, because while I respect what Andrew Griffiths has done there, he's fought a battle within government for this, because, as I say, there are huge vested interests pushing in the other direction. Chapeau to him, chapeau to the advisors that I've been talking to over recent weeks. But it's obviously important. It's on the Treasury's masthead. But it is just a press release. We need to see this actioned, and then once the regulations and laws have changed, as I said to you, Anne, they need to be imposed. There needs to be vigilance about this. So many people want to withdraw banking facilities, want to withdraw cash. GB News is standing up for the millions who don't.
Liam Halligan, excellent stuff. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Well, we're going back to Downing Street, actually, right now, but this time for a different reason. Our political editor, the legendary Christopher Hope, is live for us now at number 10 with some exclusive revelations about the Prime Minister's Stop the Boats pledge. A very good morning to you, Christopher. What can you tell us about the boats and whether or not anything substantial is being done?
Well, you remember from last week, the figure of illegal crossings over the Channel went above 100,000, and that was over 5 years. But what alarmingly for Rishi Sunak is today we are about probably to pass the 25,000 figure crossing since he became Prime Minister at the end of October last year. That means that 1 in 4 of all those crossings have happened since he was behind me in 10 Downing Street. Back in January, he said he would stop the boats. That's one of his 5 pledges for this year. It's a reminder of how this really is on him, this idea that he can't really secure that southern border, the border which many people felt would have been made secure post-Brexit, when we were told we'd be trying to protect the border and make sure that this couldn't happen again. And that's why I think it'll be an unwelcome reminder today for Sunak as he gets ready for the World Cup final with his bunting on Sunday. But he's got to get cracked down and deal with this issue. The problem he's got is the whole policy is tied up in the courts, this Rwanda plan, the idea that you break the model of these people traffickers by sending people who arrive here straight to Rwanda for processing. That's in the court, and that won't be decided, I'm told, until December. That's 4 more months of nothing happening on this policy, 4 more months of Labour leaping on these figures as evidence of government failure.
100,000 mark was passed last week. That's the numbers of dinghy arrivals since 2018. 25,000 on Rishi's watch. The Bibby Stockholm catastrophe, the only boat they've managed to stop. Now £500 million going to France, and the numbers are going up. Do you think Rishi Sunak might live to regret saying he can stop the boats, or is he just like King Canute? He's shouting at a tide he has no power over.
Stop the boats, Martin, is a pledge with no time, no ending. He said he'll stop the boats, but not this year, at some point in the future. If he gets there by the next election, which is due to be next summer or next autumn, it'll be amazing. I literally stop the boats. That's going to be a heck of a challenge for him. But I think he's trying to show he's trying to do it. But I think a lot of people who support the Tory party want them to do better in the polls. They're telling me they want to see a vision from Mr Sunak, an idea of what he wants to do beyond the election, some sunny up plans. Just starting raining, by the way, so not very sunny here either, but some idea of hope, and he hasn't offered it yet.
OK, Christopher, thanks very much indeed. We'll let you get out of the rain. Nice to see the bunting behind you supporting the Lionesses on Sunday morning. Right, we're going to be back with you in a couple of moments talking about our memories of Parky.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello again, 18 minutes past 9. Tributes still pouring in for Sir Michael Parkinson, of course one of Britain's most celebrated broadcasters, and we all gathered yesterday that he had died at the age of 88.
Yeah, in a television career spanning 7 decades, Sir Michael, fondly called Parky by friends and fans, and that's basically all of us.
By everybody.
Yeah, became one of the greatest interviewers of all time, if not the greatest, with his long-running chat show.
Yeah, Stephanie Tecci is with us. Called him Parky as well when you met him, I expect. Did you?
Because he's so... I just had that feeling of endearment towards him, and he was so welcome. He had that northern hospitality. Just every time I spoke to him, he was just very kind, very authentic, as many people have said, and it was so weird to be interviewing him. Because
there you are. You can see you're in the same colour there, interviewing Parky.
And I just think to myself, it's one of those things. He was a legend, and he actually deserves that name and that title. And as you can imagine, there's so many people across the showbiz industry who've been leading tributes, including Stephen Fry, who was interviewed by Parky, and he said he was impossibly thrilling. And then we've had Twiggy Lawson, who said he was a wonderful listener and a true gentleman. But what's been quite heartbreaking is Dickie Bird, who's the former cricket umpire. He spoke to him the day before he died.
Yes.
And he said, you know, they cracked a few jokes together, but he said as he was coming off the phone, he had a feeling that was the last time he was going to speak to Parky. They had been friends for 74 years and had grown up as teenagers together in Barnsley. So there are people who have known and loved him in a personal capacity.
I think that's lovely, see, that you've got the Dickie Bird who's known him since they were kids and spoke to to him on the last day.
Yeah.
And then all of the celebrities, because so many, not just celebrities, but people were interesting people that Parky had interviewed, and many times often because they liked being interviewed by Parky.
Yeah. And to build that trust with celebrities is very hard, especially in this day and age. So he really did set the precedence. And, you know, when a celebrity can trust you with their story, it says a lot about your character as well. And, you know, he did receive a knighthood in 2008 for his work, decades of work, and he said he never expected to be knighted. He thought he would more turn into a Martian than receive a knighthood.
But that would have meant an awful lot to him, because he was a patriot as well, wasn't he? He was very proud of being a Yorkshireman, but also being a Brit.
And with Muhammad Ali, I mean, not even Joe Frazier got through 4 rounds with Muhammad Ali, but Parky did 4 times he did it. And what was fascinating about that was watching how they both grew.
Yeah.
You know, Muhammad, you know, he was deteriorating towards the end because of you know, his condition, and but there was such a warmth between them because they had a depth and a length of friendship.
And that's the beauty of an interview. When you really connect with someone, it goes beyond trying to impress the audience. There's that genuine connection, and I think that is what Sir Michael Parkinson had.
Yes, he was very famous as well for interviewing Catherine Bramwell Booth, who was the Salvation Army. She was from the family. She was the daughter of the family that founded the Salvation Army. She was a very old lady when he interviewed her, but she got he got her eyes to twinkle. They sort of enjoyed making little jokes with each other. It was one of the. It's probably on YouTube somewhere, and if it is, I highly recommend it. One of the best bits of television you've ever seen in your life. Parky interviewing her. And she wasn't a celebrity. She was just an amazing person.
And I think that's what people forget. Like, he interviewed all walks of life, not just celebrities as well. And to be honest, I was always secretly hoping for his show to come back on, because after he battled prostate cancer in 2013, he said he had no intentions of retiring. So I kind of secretly wanted him to come back on screen.
It was really moving earlier. We spoke to Sir Michael Grade.
Lord Grade he is now.
Yeah, and he said we won't see Parky's like again because of the change in celebrity culture, the desire for sound bites. You know, we don't get this long form, more intimate, more conversational, more personable approach. And he said we won't see his like again, which in a sense is sad, but you can get it.
Yes, and I don't think that's... things go in trends, and there will one day be another great interviewer like Parky, but it probably needs somebody to come up naturally. Yes. Just because he came out of nowhere. He was just a journalist working on local papers and things like that. But then suddenly it's as though the spotlight found him. We've all got our favourite photographs of ourselves with... I got to know Parky pretty well because at TVAM he was one of the original famous 5, and then I came in as the new blood. When we went out to Australia, he joined me out in Australia. He and his wife Mary joined me on the evening, I think, of our wedding, my wedding. They didn't make the wedding, but they did make the buffet afterwards. And they were, there they are in our house in Sydney. And there's Parky at the front there. And I treasure that photograph even more now. That's me. Yeah, well, darling, I was once. Yeah. And there we met up again just a few years ago. And he was always generous, always fun to know.
And he had a lovely smile.
Yeah.
Lovely smile.
And of course, as we pay tribute to him, as the nation does, all you can say is, you know, our sympathies go to Mary. Very long marriage with Mary Parkinson, very successful marriage, and 3 sons who will all be feeling terrible. Probably, hopefully, won't be watching the television or reading the papers. But his face is everywhere in the papers, and it's lovely to be able to pay tribute to him. Marvellous body of work. You
have to give credit where it's due.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stephanie, thanks for joining us this morning, and it's been a wonderful moment. You've been sharing your stories on
it's been a lovely programme, so all we can say is we'll do it again tomorrow, if you like. We'll be here at 6, won't we? Join us again. Right now, it's Britain's Newsroom with Tom and Emily.
That's right, big show coming up today, lots to get stuck into. And kicking off with an enormous exclusive from our very own new political editor, Chris Hope. It turns out that 25,000 migrants have crossed the channel illegally since Rishi Sunak took office.
And the UK's birth rate has collapsed. We'll be digging into the statistics and finding out what that means for Britain.
All that coming up right after these messages.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office. It's a windy start to the day, and you'll notice the humidity out there, even if it's not especially sunny. That humidity, along with some instability, courtesy of low pressure to the southwest, leading to the risk of thunderstorms across central and southern parts during the morning this morning. Could cause some impacts with frequent lightning and some intense bursts of rain, but as always, these thunderstorms will be hit and miss, and they do tend to die away as they push northeastwards during the morning. Northern Scotland staying fine, southwest England largely fine as well. Some sunshine coming through, but a lot of cloud and a strong wind, especially for northwest Wales. 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts could impact people on their holidays, for example. Then, well, it gets very lively overnight. A band of heavy rain moves into southwestern areas. That pushes into the rest of England, into Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by midnight. And at the same time, there's the risk of some serious thunderstorms developing across eastern England. Frequent lightning, large hail, intense outbreaks of rain. It's also going to be a windy night and a muggy night. 18, 19 Celsius across some parts of southern UK and mid to high teens widely by dawn across many parts